mess up because Ron's on.
Oh, there it goes. Okay. Or live. Okay. Welcome tonight to our Four Horsemen Friday Night Magic stream. We got Modern going on tonight. We're just going to jump right into it. We have... Well, first of all, we have me, Ethan Rapking, in the booth, and also...
Me, Dennis Barcelou, here giving you good commentary for tonight.
We're going to just jump right into it. We got Wyatt, who is on Dredge, and we have Patrick, who is on Margaproc. So,
should be an interesting matchup.
Should be. I don't think I've seen Margaproc, ever played.
It's been a while, at least. It's been a while.
Yeah, so it looks like they're ready, so we're going to go ahead and
get into it.
Looks like who's on the play here?
Wyatt's on the play.
Wyatt, do not play.
Playing his graveyard out in front like a real bro. A real Dredge bro.
Oh, I thought he was playing his lands out in front there for a second. I was about to go down there and yell at him.
Come on, Wyatt's not a savage like that. He may be a savage, but he's not quite that savage. Let's see if his shock down to 19 or 17. Yes, it is.
Starting off with the Neonate. That's a pretty classic start for Dredge.
You might say it's the best start for Dredge.
Probably the best start.
Faithless Looting's pretty good, but Neonate gets access to some pretty nutty starts.
You're not wrong, my friend. It looked like both players kept their opening 7 as well.
Should make for an interesting match.
So I believe Margaproc's main card is
Sarah Ascendant.
Not Sarah Ascendant. It's the
Martyr Sands, I believe.
Martyr Sands, where you sacrifice it and then you reveal your hand. What happened?
Ooh. We've got a Stinkweed Imp Dredge for 5 for Wyatt's turn.
I'm not sure what happened here.
And then dredging Dark Blast for the turn. It's a pretty good start for Wyatt. He's doing about everything that he wants to.
Dark Blast, and you want to get that off the table as soon as possible. Wow, it's a 1/1 at least.
Yeah, that is definitely a card that will run away with the game.
Yes.
Ooh,
hitting
Ghost Quarter.
Ghost Quarter. What is that he has? What land was that? What did he just Ghost Quarter there?
Looks like maybe City of Brass?
City of Brass. Okay.
That's what I'm guessing. Because he didn't put any counters on it, so it's not a Gemstone Cavern, for sure.
I believe that's what it is, yeah. The weird white-bordered City of Brass.
Kind of throws you off a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Let's see.
It looks like Patrick's stuck on one land. Oh, no. Well, he just Ghost Quartered. I forgot that's what he just did.
You gotta remember those Ghost Quarters, my friend. It's very important. I do find it interesting that he was willing to Ghost Quarter the City of Brass rather than advancing his own mana.
Yeah. Typically, that's not really what you want to be doing, is putting stuff in the graveyard for Dredge. He's just going to be able to get those lands back with life from the limb at some point. Got another Sarah.
Yes, he will. Definitely seems like Patrick's not really doing too much.
Double Dark Amoeba.
That is about the best Dredge you could have hoped for.
What's that last card? Is that Scourge Devil?
Maybe. Might also be a... Looks like it's 1 mana, so it might be a foil Insolent Neonate.
Oh,
that's what
those
I'm
foil
guessing.
cards.
They make it a little bit difficult to see.
Yeah.
Ooh, and a path for
snapping that path off on that Prize Amalgam. I mean, that's probably one of the main targets you want to hit. I'm surprised he did that on his end step, though.
Yeah, that does seem a little... I guess it's just being mana efficient on Patrick's side. He doesn't want to leave
that. On his end step. Okay, that makes more sense.
He doesn't want to leave that 1 mana unused for the turn.
That looks like a Flagstones of
Trocaire, I believe.
It's something like that.
It's a difficult word.
Just passing the turn. Did you get a look
Dredging.
at what was in Patrick's hand?
I saw another Path to Exile, but
Path
other
to
than
Exile.
that, it is unsure. Ooh, that's a Haunted Deadness
Haunted Dead.
in Wyatt's graveyard now. That's pretty interesting. Interesting
Wyatt's
tech.
hat's in the way. Can't really see. It's always weird having those Narcomoebas stuck in your hand as a Dredge player. I believe Wyatt's
it is.
running one Steam Vents in his deck just to be able to kind of cast those prized amalgams and Narcomoebas that get stuck in his hand.
Yeah, between one Steam Vents and then having access to City of Brass and or Gemstone Caverns, or Gemstone Mine rather. That's about all you're gonna need,
Right.
just to keep him from getting stranded in there. See, so he's flashing back Faithless Looting. First draw, dredging a Golgari Thug. Let's see what he does for the second draw. I imagine that Life for the Loam. Ooh,
the
nope, second Thug. There's that Steam Vent you were talking
Yeah.
about.
Got a Conflagrate in his graveyard. How many cards does he have in his hand?
I would venture
Well,
to guess
he has
a
a full
lot,
grip, I guess.
but he still needs to discard 2 from the Faithless Looting.
I believe so, yes. It's like
Stinkweed Imps.
Stinkweed Imps.
Double Stinkweed Imp. That's
attack with 2.
about the best thing you could hope for.
I got it. That is a Ranger of Eos. I believe he's going to go get some Soul Sisters here with that.
Imagine at least one of those would be a Martyr, considering it's the namesake for the deck.
Yes, Martyr of Sands is one.
Now the question is, does he go double Martyr and just try to accelerate his life total, or does he get
He's
double
going
Martyr?
Seems pretty good. Do you remember what the other Martyrs are from that set?
Oh man,
There was one for each color.
I remember that there's one for each color, but yeah, you never see them.
No, you don't. Martyr of Sands is by far the most played.
And considering that Martyr of Sands is the most played and you rarely ever see it, that's saying something for the Martyrs.
Martyr Proc got quite a bit of play not long ago. Is this a Conflagrate?
Conflagrate for looks like
2.
2, just the 2, 3,
4.
4.
What is he? 5.
Conflag for 5.
So 1 there and 4. Okay. So the black one, Black Martyr, was Martyr of Bones. Reveal X black cards from your hand. Sacrifice Martyr of Bones. Remove up to X target cards in a single graveyard. So
those Narcomoebas really like getting in there.
well, that's what they're supposed to do.
And then that Dakmor salvage you dredged earlier, getting back those Bloodghast. Got a couple of them in there. Bringing another Amalgam along for the ride. So
It looks like. Let's see here. How much life did?
he's down to 13.
He's down to 13. He'll probably be gaining. He'll probably block with Martyr of Sands and then activate the Martyr of Sands ability here.
I would imagine. He doesn't want to get below 10 because that makes those Bloodghast way too
Correct.
dangerous. Ooh, Wyatt taking a regular draw. That's
Yes.
interesting.
Quite rare for the Dredge player.
I think it's because he doesn't have any green sources.
That could be.
So
That could be.
dredging life from the lump's not really appealing when you can't cast it.
Maybe that Ghost Quarter earlier in the game might have been a wise move for Patrick in the first place.
Yeah, hindsight definitely makes it look much, much better.
Correct.
And there's Wyatt swinging in with everything. As
So
we
he's
would
activating
figure.
the Martyr, revealing
Revealing
4, so 12. He'll be gaining 12. So he's taking...
I think he's taking 6 and then gaining 12, so he'll...
Thank you, Patrick, for that. He's going up to 25.
And then one of the blood gas is getting pathed. So he's actually only taking 4. So he's down to 21 after damage. Man, and just with that, you can see the power of Martyr Sands, where you can really gain life in a hurry, especially when your entire deck is mono white.
Yes, indeed.
Ooh, Wyatt taking a normal draw for the first of his Faithless Lootings.
I think you are right. He's missing the green mana, and he's dredging the Stinkweed
this time.
Double prized amalgam. That
pretty
was
good.
not
It's pretty
a bad
good.
one. Now I'm a little confused as to why. No, never mind.
I'm interested in the fact that he did take one normal draw. Didn't get a really clear look at what he got, but it looks like he picked up
I
that
think he
other
picked
life
up-
from the loam
yeah, I
that he just
believe-
discarded.
I believe that's what he
And it's
he's casting Stinkweed up. That is interesting.
probably as a hedge against any Sarah Ascendant
Sarah
shenanigans.
Ascendant, yes.
'Cause I feel like that card in this matchup could definitely get out of hand.
Playing the Martyr Proc. Or Martyr Sands.
Well, when your deck's called Martyr Proc, you better play the Martyrs.
Should be.
Let's see if he takes the normal draw or if he dredges this time.
Thinking about it.
Well, I don't believe he has any Bloodghast in there. And I think might be one... Okay, so there's a Bloodghast. And another Dakmor Salvage. So that's pretty good. Next turn he can dredge that. Or he could even dredge that now if he wants to flash back a Faithless Looting.
So he's going to gain
12.
12 here.
Whew.
Up to 32. 33.
Looks like they have him at flat 30.
Did we miss a...
Oh, he only gained 9.
Oh.
He only gained 9. 3 cards. So I guess the question is now, does he flashback Faithless Looting? No, he's just getting in the red zone.
Now, the issue I see here for Patrick, yes, he's gaining a lot of life, but he's not really advancing his board state to a point where he can actually start racing. Oh, that is a Wrath of God.
That's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Now, the only thing that's really good for Wyatt here is he does have that other Dakmor Salvage, so he can rebuild pretty quickly. Just a matter of getting back that Dakmor Salvage for a landfall trigger, and then he'll get all of those amalgams back.
He is dredging the Dakmor Salvage, of course, as you said, so he can get his board back. He'll be getting
I think
3.
2 Bloodghasts and 3 amalgams
Yes.
if I'm keeping track correctly.
I think he might actually have a 3rd Bloodghast in there, but I could be wrong.
I think at this point he's just lamenting the fact that all of his potential green sources are in the graveyard.
Now, the concern I would see here for Wyatt is just milling himself out.
That definitely seems like it could be a possibility, but
It depends on how much life Patrick is able to gain here just to kind of stall out and see if he can try and outmill.
was that a Gideon of the Trials?
I believe so. I believe he runs a couple of them in his deck.
Wyatt moving the graveyard off to the side, maybe indicating that dredging is no longer on the agenda for the night.
Exactly what I was saying. You can't be dredging too much. He's getting two Martyr Sands here.
I would imagine Wyatt probably wants to dredge at least once more just to get back that Dark Blast. Because Dark Blast clearing the way here for a swing, that'd be a swing for 13. That'd put that put Patrick in a really dangerous spot.
Well, he can gain. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He can gain up to 12 life next turn with one of those Martyr Sands and have a blocker.
He can gain 12 with one, and then the second one will gain an additional 9.
So that is 21.
That'd be pretty good.
That's quite a bit of life.
I'm actually surprised he didn't. That Wyatt didn't dredge that Dark Blast there. I figured he would want to clear the way and let all of his attackers actually get in there.
I wonder how many cards are left in his deck. It can't be too many. It looks like he's gotten to the point where his graveyard is taller than his actual deck is. Getting back. Now, what is that?
Is that Scourge Devil or Rally the Peasants?
It could be a Rally the Peasants. I know.
Scourge Devil.
It's Scourge Devil?
Based on the fact that it is a creature. It has power and toughness. So that is a foil Scourge Devil. Gotta make it difficult for us.
Blocking 1. So Scourge Devil gives the team +1/+0 or +2/+0?
I believe it's +2/+0.
So he's down to 4.
Down all the way to 4. So now it'll be interesting to see. And then Unearth exiles the Scourge Devil. So that was Scourge Devil for sure. It'll be interesting to see if Patrick decides to go all in on life gain this turn, or if he just presents as many blockers as he can.
That is a Gideon. What else is in his hand? An Oblivion Ring?
Yeah, that looks like an Oblivion Ring.
What is right beside the Oblivion Ring?
I am not entirely sure.
So he will reveal 4 up to 12. So he'll
be up to 16. Unfortunately for him, Wyatt has found his green mana, so that's interesting. I would have expected him to dredge life from the loam there, because I'm pretty sure he has at least one more Conflagrate in his graveyard.
Picked up his graveyard, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult for us to see.
And then with the block and the gaining life after that,
It'll be up
Patrick
to
actually
18.
gains 2 more. But now you'd have to imagine he's running
Oblivion Ring
pretty well on empty.
I cannot tell.
Is that a promo Oblivion Ring?
I don't believe they made a promo Oblivion Ring.
Whatever it is definitely an exile effect, which is pretty good for him right now, though.
Down to 14 here.
There's a Stinkweed Imp.
So this Gideon is probably going to, well,
I would imagine Gideon comes down and... Do you plus the Gideon on one of the...
just another day. Is that a Wrath of God or a Day of Judgment?
I believe it was a Day of Judgment. He
could
not have flung that at the table hard enough. And I believe this is an emblem proxy. Yes, that is a Gideon emblem proxy. He does not lose the game anymore.
Until Gideon is off the table, at least.
Yeah.
A Gideon.
I imagine this is where, if Wyatt saw a Conflagrate in there, I imagine he gets back a life from the loam.
I would believe so. Counting, he does not have many cards left in his deck.
This is getting to be some risky business. Deep in the tank on this one. Those top deck wrath effects have really done a good job of stalling this game out. All right.
They definitely have. So he will. There is the Conflagrate.
Found a Conflagrate, and he also found another Bloodghast. So if I imagine he probably Conflagrates.
He's going to get this Gideon off the table.
The Question is,
But-
does he keep a land to trigger Bloodghast?
I just think he's going to take out Gideon here. And he'll be able to get his Bloodghast back next turn. I think he can survive after one more dredge effect. Thinking about playing something.
Was that
Didn't get a good look at to see.
another O-ring effect, maybe?
It might have been. That is. I'm not entirely sure what that is.
Woo. Well, it seems to have garnered a concession from Wyatt. We're
going to go to sideboarding here. I'm going to let Dennis talk a little bit about sideboarding. I need to go and get the drafters started. So I will be right back.
So it'll be interesting to see how much they sideboard for this game, because I know traditionally the dredge decks don't particularly sideboard too much. There's a lot going on in the deck that you don't really want to mess with. So it'll be an interesting see. And we will work on that, having it listed under Cards Against Humanities. Just give us just a minute. As for the Martyr proc deck, I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what to expect out of that. It has been a long time since I've seen anybody play that deck. So we'll all be along for the ride on that one. Okay. Oh. Still sideboarding here. Looks like Patrick's already decided on what he wants to be doing. Wyatt's still a little in the tank. Like I said, the dredge deck's a little difficult sideboard with that, because you're never quite sure how much you want to side out. There are a lot of tight numbers in there as far as figuring out what all you're running, and you want to make sure that you still have your critical number of dredgers so you don't actually hurt your main game plan by over sideboarding. But it was actually a pretty long game one, considering that took about a little over 20 minutes. It'll be interesting to see if game 2 and or 3 get a little bit faster. We'll have to see how that goes.
And I am back. So, did you talk a little bit about sideboarding options that these two players might be bringing in?
Yeah, the dredge deck, sideboarding for the dredge deck is always difficult because you don't want to hurt your primary game plan to bring in a lot of times they bring in removal, and for the most part they normally bring in like Ancient Grudges and maybe like Abrupt Decays, expecting to see Grafdigger's Cage and other graveyard hate.
Right.
Especially when you're against this mono white deck, you can imagine he probably has Rest in Pieces.
I'd assume he's not interacting with his graveyard at all, so I would assume he'd have Rest in Peace or Grafdigger's Cage or something of the like.
Probably some number of both.
Probably.
Like, I would imagine maybe like a 2-1 split of Rest in Peace and Grafdigger's Cage, just as a hedge.
Looks like Wyatt's taking mulligan here.
Now, if you're Wyatt, do you think you aggressively mulligan to try to get to maybe an Abrupt Decay? Or are you content with just kind of just taking whatever you get and hoping you power through it?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I was updating the information. It seems like we were under Cards Against Humanity here.
Yeah, I already fixed it.
Oh, you already fixed it? Okay,
Yeah.
my bad.
But no. If you're piloting Dredge, do you mulligan aggressively, or do you kind of just try to take the fastest hand you can get and try to power through whatever hate they might be bringing from the other side of the table?
It depends. I think you have to mulligan somewhat aggressively, especially if you know that your opponent's going to be bringing in some sort of hate. And you know that your opponent's going to be bringing in some sort of hate, but Patrick's deck is definitely going to be bringing in hate because he is not interacting with his graveyard at all. So you have to probably mulligan down to maybe one Nature's Claim or something like that.
Either Nature's Claim or, normally they run at least 1 or 2 Abrupt Decays.
Right.
So I imagine that's actually the card that you want to see. Especially considering Wyatt's difficulties last game in getting hold of green mana.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine he also probably doesn't keep a hand that doesn't give him access to green. Oof. Picking up a Narcomoeba off the Faithless Looting's always a pain.
I think did he have this Narcomoeba in his hand to start with?
Yeah. Having a Narcomoeba in your opening hand in Dredge is basically like taking a mulligan as is.
I agree. Yes.
So Wyatt's more or less starting on 5, which is difficult.
It can be simultaneously the best card in your deck and the worst card in your deck for Dredge players.
So
Immediately sacking that insolent Neonate, playing the Black Fleet Clips, getting back the Blood Gas, playing another insolent Neonate. I believe he needs to find some sort of removal for this.
Yes.
For this Serra Ascendant, though.
He definitely needs to find removal and or a Dredger, because with all that drawing and discarding, he still has not found a Dredger.
He still does not have a Dredger, which is surprising. His hand is what? Narcomoeba and a City of Brass, I believe?
Yes, it is. And there goes the Narcomoeba.
Getting that out of your hand as quickly as possible.
Still no Dredgers for
I
Wyatt.
believe he picked up another Neonate.
That would be unfortunate.
Or a Conflagrate. It's a red card.
It is for sure a red card. Patrick's leaning way far back, so we can't even try to see what's in his hand. He's trying to keep the secret tech a secret.
Oh, this is not good for Wyatt.
Yeah, that Martyr normally does not spell good tidings.
Oh, I believe he kept a full grip too. I believe he has 6 cards in his hand. This getting back, flashing back the Faithless Looting, drawing 2. So you got a Dackmore Salvage.
Yeah.
So he's got a Dredger
and a Mountain, which that is not. Seems like all he's been able to pick up today is land.
Yeah. Well, last game he was having trouble finding that green source. This time he has his green source, but it seems like all he's drawing now is land. And
there goes the green source.
Wyatt does not run a basic forest in his deck, does he?
Most of the Dredge decks do not run a basic
I didn't
forest.
believe they did.
I'm pretty sure they primarily run basic mountains and then the occasional basic swamp.
Now, I'm surprised that Patrick must not have too many white cards in his hand because he's not sacrificing that Martyr Pock to make that, or that Martyr Sands to make. It's 18-18.
Is that 18-18?
Yes, I believe so. It might be 18-16 actually.
Question is who has the 16?
I'm gonna run down.
Oh no, that's 18-18.
Okay,
we're good. We're
okay.
good.
Now, I'm surprised that he's not sacrificing that Martyr Sands to make his life total over 30.
I imagine he probably wants to do exactly what he's doing right now. Do some block shenanigans with the Martyr.
And let's see how many white cards he has in his hand. Just one. Wow.
That's interesting that he only has the one. Actually, I might have been right the first time. I think it was 16-16.
Well, this is...
It's
okay,
now a
this-
16-19.
Okay.
Get that corrected real quick. It's interesting that he has a hand with only the one white card.
I'm surprised. I'm wondering what else he has in his hand now.
The real question is does he not have more white cards in hand, or does he just not want to reveal them?
It looks like he has a bunch of lands. I see a plains, and I think I see another flagstones of
Trocaire.
We'll just call it flagstones from now on.
Flagstone seems fine. Ooh.
Conflagrating.
The hard cast Conflagrate. Some might say why it's trying to do this on hard mode.
That, I believe, is the land that allows you to put things from your graveyard onto the bottom of your deck.
I believe you are correct.
I don't remember what it's called.
Works really well with Ranger of Eos, though.
It works really well with Squadron Hawk as well.
That is also true. But we haven't seen Squadron Hawks yet out of him.
I believe he's running them, though. I believe I've seen him before.
I'm also interested that we haven't seen any of the normal Soul Sisters.
I would agree. Well, he's not playing the Soul Sisters plan of playing a bunch of little creatures like Lingering Souls or anything like that. So he's not really getting the value out of all that. So
That's true.
It just seems like he's gaining a lot of life in large chunks rather than the small incremental life gain that you get off the Soul Sisters.
Now, I do find it interesting that he was willing to keep... Because he kept his 7.
Mm-hmm.
So either he kept a decent 7 and then has drawn nothing but land, or maybe he might have wanted to consider a mulligan to 6, because it just doesn't seem like he's doing a whole lot. And whatever sideboard hate that he has, hasn't seen it. So I'm interested to see what and if he brought in for sideboard hate, because you assume that there's something there, but I don't know if you keep a 7 that doesn't have it.
Well, he must have thought that he'd be able to at least try and find something. He
Ooh.
might have something in his hand that we just don't know about.
Looks like 3 lands and maybe a something.
Now, the issue that I see with this Martyr deck is the card advantage is definitely very weak. So being able to find that hate is going to be difficult for him.
Yeah. Basically seems like his card advantage boils down to creature tutors.
Yes.
Like Ranger of Eos and whatever number of Squadron Hawks he's running. Wyatt showing the Dakmor salvage.
That he just dredged. Well, he just dredged the
Stinkweed
Stinkweed
in.
imps.
So Patrick must have already known about the Dakmor salvage. I think that was the dredge of the previous turn.
Yes.
I imagine it's pretty appealing to get that Dakmor salvage down now, considering that there's a Bloodghast and a couple amalgams in the graveyard. Just try to get as much power on the board as you can before...
How many amalgams does he have? He has...
I know...
At least one. I see one.
One for sure. The previous amalgam was exiled.
No, off the path to exile. That's correct.
Yes. And there's a hit.
Taking 2.
I think we missed the 2 from last turn as well.
So he's down to 15?
Down to 15. It's providing us with some interesting games, but I'm not sure how much of it is the gameplay or just not drawing.
No, what is that?
That is... Ooh. That is the card that Wyatt conceded to last round.
Splendid Reclamation, I believe. Not Splendid.
One of the reclamations?
Something like that. I went down and asked Patrick.
Seems like any effect that gets back multiple 1-drops for this deck seems like it'd be a pretty good choice. I also imagine that Martyr's probably not long for this world. It's probably going to be on chump and sack duty, unless Patrick is just on stone nothing. There's definitely at least one castable white card in there. I think it's a plains and a card. Ooh, yep. Wyatt needs to make sure he taps his lands correctly. Okay, so there is a cast Life from the Loam.
I believe we're going to see some Conflagrates here.
I imagine that's probably the smartest move on his part. Kind of clear the way pre-combat, and not let there be any shenanigans.
Right. He has 2 Conflagrates in the yard, so...
I do find it interesting that he elected to play that land. Is he going to flash back a Faithless Looting?
He might be. That's what...
Now, this I find interesting. I would have imagined that he probably... Okay, getting back to Dark Blast makes sense.
He still has the Dakmor Salvage up as well, so he will be able to do quite a bit. Oh, no.
Is he going to...
Looking for...
pitch a
some
land
discards
and a Dredger.
Surprised he had a Stinkweed Imp in his hand. I'm surprised that he's not.
He might want to keep the Stinkweed Imp in his hand so that he can cast it just in case Patrick randomly gains a large chunk of life. Got to make sure you have something capable of blocking the Serra Ascendant. That is definitely a card that can run away with this game in a hurry.
It is a scary card. Absolutely scary card.
Wyatt showing Patrick that he knows 2 cards in hand. I imagine if he was paying attention, probably knows a 3rd or a 4th just from Dredge. Ooh, are we going to see a double block coming through? Looks like he's thinking about it. Oh, just blocking the 2 Bloodghast. This is what makes it interesting that he didn't, or that he played the mountain earlier.
He's going to Dark Blast the Serra Ascendant, I believe.
In response to Patrick retrieving the path. Or does he Dark Blast the Martyr since he no longer has mana up to activate it? That makes sense. This does still interest me as to why Wyatt played his land pre-combat. I don't know. Part of me likes the idea of holding your land to second main, especially if you're swinging with multiple Bloodghast.
Here comes the Hawks.
Hawking it up, as they would say.
Caw. Getting 1, 2, probably going to get the full 4 here.
I would imagine.
Bringing all...
I think the biggest benefit of this at this point is just shuffling that path back into his library. Give him a chance of actually drawing it.
Going to get rid of that. Now he's going to be able to... Now what's great about this is that he's basically going to have infinite blockers for these Bloodghast, because he does have that card that allows him to put Squadron Hawks on the bottom of his graveyard. So he'll be able to block this Bloodghast,
and then just chain Squadron Hawks to the bottom of his library, and then every time he casts a new one,
he'll go get
he goes and gets his buddy.
He's dredging. I did not see what dredger he
looks like a Life from the Loam.
Yeah, so dredge 3.
With the Conflagrates already in his graveyard, Life from the Loam's probably the best thing he could be dredging. Yeah, you can see Wyatt sees what he's doing now. I think he's
going to Conflagrate this Squadron Hawk.
Yeah, this is the Conflagrate turn. This is clear the way, dump some stuff, keep 1 land to trigger the Bloodghast that's in there, get back an Amalgam.
He's pitching 4, so 3 and 1.
He's down to 10. Which gives that Bloodghast haste. That's
8.
Nice 6. The second Bloodghast has haste because he was already down to 10.
Yes.
Nice little bit of clean play from Wyatt.
He has a second conflict in his yard, right? So he can just win next turn, right?
Patrick just brought back that Saracen and that Martyr again. And now he's gonna get a Martyr active with 3 Squadron Hawks. That's 9 life. That's a pretty good cushion.
Not good for Wyatt.
Wyatt will probably have to get back this life from the loam.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and he just pointed at the amalgam. He missed that amalgam trigger from the previous turn. That might come to bite him. Oh, never mind. He got another Bloodghast.
Another
Ooh,
amalgam.
and a second amalgam. That's pretty tasty.
So I think Wyatt's going to probably try and set up, try and kill him next turn. Even through this
This Martyr.
this Martyr.
Yeah, I imagine Conflagrate for 2, probably sending 1 at each the Ascendant and the Martyr. At the very least, force him to use the Martyr now. And then keeping 1 land so he can trigger the additional Bloodghasts and get those amalgams back. He just needs to make sure he doesn't forget the trigger this time.
He's up to 15, it looks like.
Yeah, he is up to 15, and he did keep that City of Brass so that he can. The question is this: he should play it for turn, I would imagine.
Well, it gets back.
It would pull 8 power out of the graveyard,
Mm-hmm.
which right now would be pretty big.
Attacking for 4, that puts him at 11.
And then there's the land, bringing back the Bloodghast.
And all does price. There, he
Hey.
does not forget those triggers this time. This is very important for him to get those triggers this time. Now, he's going to Squadron Hawk it up right now.
Probably get back. Yeah, he's going to put the 1 Squadron Hawk back on the bottom of his library first. No, he is just
Put
throwing Hawks out.
He's gonna chain these together.
I'm interested that he did this after casting 2 of the Squadron Hawks and not before. The only thing that makes me think of is since he's planning on chumping, he wants to get multiple Squadron Hawks at the same time. So he can chump, put a second one on the bottom of his library, and then get 2 Squadron Hawks out of his library on 1 cast, which is probably what he's thinking.
Now we're at an interesting point in the game where basically they all can.
Woo, there's the Scourge Devil.
There it is.
Is that enough,
I
though?
don't believe so.
So you imagine he probably blocks the 2 amalgams.
So
he's taking
3, 6, 9.
And it's
He'll probably be taking 9 here. And there's a Path to Exile. Okay.
so he's still taking 9.
Still taking 9.
Down to 2. And then at end of turn, the Scourge Devil goes away. So Wyatt at this point is just looking for another Conflagrate or really just another combat, and he's got it.
Well, he'll be able to. Remember, Patrick's going to be getting some Squadron Hawks here again.
But can he cast? How many can he cast?
I believe he can cast 2 or 3.
So he'll
So maybe he
two
won't.
mana ties up, putting 1 on the bottom, and then he's got 5 mana available, so he'll be able to cast 2, which still puts him dead to the board.
But there's a lot of life gaining in this deck, so see what he draws here.
Maybe he pulls
Then we get a good
another
look at it.
timely Wrath effect.
Well, even a Wrath effect would not do it because
No,
Wyatt
and that-
would just be able to get back the
Bloodghast with a
Bloodghast
land.
again.
That is correct.
So we're going to game 3 here. Do any of these players switch up? I did not see any hate from either of those players.
I imagine whatever hate Patrick has, at the very least, he probably aggressively mulligans this game. He'll be on the play, so he'll get a slight advantage if he can manage to get like a Rested Piece down on turn 2, or even a Grafdigger's Cage would be great there. The question is, I don't think the question is as much, do they sideboard more? I think maybe small adjustments based on play draw, but I think for the most part, it's just going to come down to how aggressively do these two players mulligan for game 3, considering what just happened right there.
I'm going to go down and let these players know that they only have about 5 more minutes left, just to let them know, because it's hard for them to see the clock from where they're sitting. So I'll be right back.
So I noticed Patrick made a couple swaps, but didn't look like he did very much. So interested to see whether or not maybe he added more hate cards, or maybe bringing in the hate cards at all. Maybe he just didn't bring in hate cards for game 2, which would be an interesting line of play. Looks like Wyatt, for the sake of time, looks like they both, for the sake of time, neglected to cut. We will see if that works for either of them. And woo! Off to the races we go. Turn 1 Serra Ascendant. Let's see what Wyatt has for a follow-up. Black Cliffs in 2, Insolent Neonate. Both starting off exactly where they want to be. Setting up to be an exciting game 3. There's the Ghost Quarter and the Saracen, blocked by the Neonate. Obviously sacked before damaged. This is exactly the start that Wyatt wants to be off onto. Let's see. Stinkweed Imp, Conflagrate, Bloodghast, a land, and a Faithless Looting. That is a pretty fantastic dredge. Has another dredger, has a target to bring back already. Ooh, and there is a Martyr for Patrick. So I'd say both players right now doing exactly what they want to do to start this game 3. Okay, Wyatt is dredging the other Stinkweed up for the start of his turn.
And I'm back. So this seems like a strong start for Patrick.
Honestly, they're both doing exactly what they want to. Question is, did Wyatt miss... Oh, Patrick is reminding him of the Narcomoeba trigger. Looks like
Good on Patrick.
Looks like Wyatt's a little bit rustier with dredge than he would let on.
Now Wyatt just rebuilt dredge, so I just got him his 3 last amalgams that he needed to play this deck again. So yes, he's probably a little rusty playing this deck.
Well, we'll have to give him a hard time for those missed triggers later. Well, there's now 2 Bloodghast in the graveyard. Looks like those are coming back. Critically, Wyatt also hit 2 Conflagrates already. So if Patrick can manage to... Ooh, and there's should be 1 damage from the City of Brass, getting back a bunch of land. It'll be interesting to see if Patrick manages to find the hate cards this time, because a Rest in Peace right now would be, as they say, pretty decent.
I see a Wrath of God in his hand.
I do see a Wrath of God.
That is a Field of Ruin right there.
Ooh. Looks like he does have a second white source in
I
hand.
see a Gideon as well. Now he can play Gideon here if he wants to, but I don't think he wants to.
Ooh.
That is a good play on...
Gets him a second white source, turns off the City of Brass, which is very flexible for Wyatt's deck.
His Martyr of Sands as well.
It does also turn on the Martyr of Sands.
Now,
I wonder, if Patrick goes to activate the Martyr, does he reveal the Wrath? Or does he withhold that information?
No, I believe he does.
Just goes for maximum life gain?
Yeah, you want your Serra Ascendant to be as big as possible.
Now, it looks like... Let's see, how many...
Okay.
Oh, not activating...
That is an
not
interesting
activating
play
the Martyr.
On Patrick's end.
I would have expected the Martyr active there. Try to power up the Ascendant rather than just pathing the lowly Narcomoeba. I guess this just shows how much he actually values the flyers in the matchup. I do think he runs the risk, though, of not being able to activate his Martyr in general, because that looked like Life from the Loam coming back, and if if Wyatt just casts this Conflagrate, clears the board out, it looks like it's not a good position for Patrick.
No, it does not. It looks like what he is going to do.
That is three cards. 4,
5. So
3 to Patrick, clears the board, clears the way for these Bloodghast to get in there.
He is not able to sacrifice his Martyr of Sands either.
That is a absolutely brutal turn of events for Patrick.
Now, Patrick has those Wrath of Gods in his hand, though.
I guess the real question is the Wrath of God good enough here? Because all Wyatt needs is one land, and at this point, all it's going to do is it's going to slow him down for a turn.
And that might be all Patrick needs to at least put this into a tie. Now, they're going to go to time. I'm going to go let them know that they are at time now, so they have 5 extra turns.
So as soon as Ethan gets down there, active player will be turn 0. So Wyatt should be turn 0. Or active player. So he should be turn 0, which means Patrick would be turn 1. Wyatt going into kind of turbo here, trying to make sure he gets this win in here in time. Plays the City of Brass, gets back some Bloodghasts, Conflagrates, deals some damage. It was a very productive turn for Wyatt, even getting back that prized amalgam. Patrick's really, really not in a good spot. Even if he makes a Gideon emblem, doesn't even have time for the emblem. He's just gonna plus it on the prized amalgam, so that amalgam can't deal damage this turn. See if Wyatt has enough to end this. It pretty much just comes down to, there we go. That is a Scourge Devil, and that is game for Wyatt. Wow, that was a quick finish there. Just shows you how quickly the Dredge deck can kind of build out of nothing and just apply pressure.
That was quite impressive, what Wyatt did. So, 2-1.
Yeah. So 2-1 for Wyatt.
Okay. We will be right back. We're going to go get you guys another match here in a few minutes. I believe everybody is done downstairs. So give us a few minutes and we will be right back for more Magic.
Okay, and welcome back, everybody. We're gonna get this underway. Other one.
Other way? Oh.
Yeah. We've got Tyler Claypole on the left here and Sean Carroll on the right. Now, Tyler is trying out the green-blue Merfolk deck that has been popping up. Wrong side again.
Oh yeah.
And Sean is playing something that I will safely call spicy.
Spicy. It's a deck that I haven't seen in a while, but I'm excited to see it here. I'll just call it spicy.
I am okay with this decision.
They are cut.
We will
Now,
see if they can both keep sevens. Looks like...
oh, yes, thank you for that.
And they are both in the 0-1 bracket. We just had to get you get the spicy deck on screen today, even though they're both a little hard out at the moment. Okay, and I believe we...
It looks like Sean's keeping his 7. It looks like Turtle's taking... We call Tyler Turtle around here, so if you hear us say Turtle, we're talking about Tyler.
It's reflex at this point. Alright.
Looks like he's going to 6. Okay.
And we'll go ahead and get them going. Okay, he's keeping his 6 scry to the bottom and on the play. Now, no 1-drop out of the green-blue Merfolk deck is a little weird. They're running the Curse Catchers and the Kamina Speakers, the new 1 green out of Ixalan that gets bigger when you control another Merfolk. That's really the power of going green-blue. Is it gives you access to Kamina Speakers and the 2-mana Lord.
The new 2-mana Lord, that is Mistbinder, I believe.
I believe you are correct. Nothing fancy like Island Walk. It just straight
+1/+1.
Yep, just straight +1/+1.
Now that is a chart to course. It looks like.
Yeah, and since Sean obviously does not have any creatures, he will have to discard.
That, I believe, I'm not sure what he discarded there. It looks possibly like a Grave Titan?
That does look like a Grave Titan to me, and that is the beginning of the spice, as we say.
That is interesting.
Now,
I would say is on the plains.
The biggest advantage that I feel like Tyler has in this matchup is that Sean is playing blue in his deck, so he doesn't even have to put in work to turn on his Island Walk from his Lords. He just gets to just flat out swing through like it doesn't even matter. Now let's see if Sean can get something going with this spicy deck. Looks like if I saw correctly, it looks like I saw a Liliana and a Thoughtseizes in his hand.
That is a Gyreach Sanitarium right there. And is that the Footsteps of the Goryo?
That is Footsteps of the Goryo.
And he's going to be getting back that what we believe is Grave Titan, or it might be, oh no, that is Woodland Primus.
That's a Woodland Primus?
Primus! The Persist creature going to destroy, just take out lands. That card has Persist. Whenever it comes into the battlefield, it destroys non-creature permanent, I believe.
That is spicy.
That is very spicy. Taking 2 here, Turtle.
Now, the question is, does Turtle have access to an Island Walk Lord? He does. That is a Master of the Pearl Trident.
It's not a bad one.
He
just passing here? Okay. It looked like Turtle.
It looked like he was looking for a does this resolve or not from Sean.
So taking 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 here.
I think that's actually a little bit more than 7, because the Kamina Speaker on its own with 1 Lord is a 4/4.
No, 7.
Or no, yeah.
I got my math right.
I am miscounting my math. That's doesn't happen very often.
It does not pump itself.
That is true. That is true. Most of the Merfolk Lords do not pump themselves. Thankfully, that would make it a little bit ridiculous. That said, that Primus did put in some work, dropping Tyler all the way from what would have been 4 lands down to a measly 2. There's a polluted Delta for Sean. Let's see if he can continue the spice and show us something else pretty funny.
Now, Footsteps of Goryo is one of the more interesting reanimate spells that we have. It does not give haste or anything like that, but it says return target creature from the field to the from the graveyard to the field, then sacrifice it at the end of the turn.
Doesn't it also say non-legendary?
No, it can be legendary.
Okay.
It can be legendary.
It's very, very similar to the card Goryo's Vengeance, which is obviously similarly named.
Except this one is sorcery speed and does not give haste.
Yes.
And it costs 3 mana.
Most people would... Well, Goryo's Vengeance costs...
2.
2.
And is an instant.
And is arcane.
And it only
They're
hits
both
legendary.
arcane. They're both arcane, actually.
They are both.
Both coming from Kamigawa block, which, as anybody that ever played during anything Kamigawa block knows, everything in Kamigawa block was legendary.
You are not wrong. Return target creature card from your graveyard to play. Sacrifice that creature at the end of the turn. So this works really well with Woodfall Primus because Woodfall Primus has Persist. So you get it back when it enters the battlefield, destroy a land or an artifact or whatever.
Woo! This is a tidy turn for Sean, able to leverage that collective brutality really well, choosing to, it looks like, use all 3 modes?
I believe so.
To clean up that Master of the Pearl Trident, duress Tyler to see if there's anything that he needs to worry about, and then also draining him, giving him a little bit more of a buffer.
He's going to be able to get in here with this Woodfall Primus. I believe that is a 6/6 at this point.
That is a big boy, one way or the other. Ooh, Tyler peels another Master of the Pearl Trident, which is pretty good for him. Makes it
5/5. So
makes it so that the Kumena's Speaker is actually threatening and not just kind of there.
I'm going to go... They need to fix their life totals here, I believe. Well, no.
Sean is going down to 9, and there
they go.
They've got Tyler's fixed. He is down to 11. Now, the real question is, does this Woodfall Primus race the Kumena's Speaker and the Master of the Pearl Trident? I would venture to say probably. The real question is going to be, does Tyler peel another Lord? Another Lord is probably enough to push him over the top.
Get in there with Woodfall Primus. Tyler's just going to take it. Have him down to 6.
And there's a Liliana. Liliana of the Veil, obviously the best Liliana, pretty much.
Most would say it's the best Liliana.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to argue for any other Liliana. There are some of the Lilianas have their niches. Liliana the Last Hope, in particular, has seen some good play in recent months and years, but it's hard to beat the 3-mana Edict continuous discard, just powerhouse of multiple formats that is Liliana of the Veil.
I remember the first time I played against a Liliana of the Veil, it felt like it was almost you're unable to get out from underneath of it. You just sack a creature and then you just can't play anything for the rest of the game because you just keep discarding it to it. That was not a good draw from Turtle.
That is probably
the worst draw that he can have at this point.
It is definitely up there.
He's
and
going
it's not
to
even
have to block here with...
The question is, does he block with the Lord or does he fire up that Mutavault and try to block with the Mutavault?
Probably the Mutavault.
I noticed Sean picked up a Gifts Ungiven, which is pretty interesting. This being a Reanimator deck, obviously Gifts Ungiven is pretty good. He can do. I imagine he has Unburial Rights in his deck. So
I would believe so. Yes.
being able to Unburial Rights.
That has Trample as well.
There they go.
What was that pickup for Turtle?
Mutavault. And we are going to game 2.
Game
Game
2,
two.
sorry.
With Spicy winning game 1. Very, very spicy. Very spicy win out of that. That Woodfall Prime has really put in work.
I did.
The fact that
It
that
did.
card has Persist. What were they thinking?
Basically, Sean was able to go 3 mana, 5/5 with Trample, destroy 2 of your lands. That is a strong play in any format that you play.
That is a crazy play, especially in a format that is dictated so much by tempo, like Modern. Just being able to have that much of a swing that early in the game, pretty much just puts it out of reach. Especially when you have a deck that's very synergy based, like Merfolk. It's just really difficult to get out from underneath that if you stumble a bit. That's one of the things that people have been enjoying about this green blue, because traditionally you see the mono blue, very clean, runs pretty much all islands, and then the Mutavaults, and then the occasional you've got your like Oboro Palace in the clouds, and those mono blue kind of spell lands, you could call them. But for the most part, you run a lot of basic islands.
With this list, you don't run that many basic islands.
You don't.
You run, I think,
you're running fetches, you're running breeding pools, you run those botanical sanctums, and the advantage that you get really is there's 2 cards that really stick out for the advantage, and it's not even really the Mistbinder, the Lord. The 2 key cards that you get from splashing green are Kumena Speaker, which is basically it's a wild Nicodle for this deck, more or less.
Sure.
Since pretty much every other Merfolk you play in the deck is a Lord, it's more or less a wild Nicodle for you, which, anybody that's played with wild Nicodles knows that card can get out of hand.
It can be pretty good.
And then also you get, most lists are running Merfolk Branchwalker, which
Now,
is the
Turtle is
2
not
mana
playing-
Explore card.
Is not playing that card, and I believe that is wrong for this list. I believe you should be playing Branchwalker if you are playing green blue, because
the power of it coming in as either a 2/1 that draws you a card or a 3/2. It just, for 2 mana, it's just,
I believe,
it's above curve for this deck. And with a deck like this where you don't have a lot of draw power, pretty much your only draw power is Silvergill Adepts, and that's even if you're still running them at this point. I think you normally trim for this deck. I know you don't run any of the blue devotion cards, like Master of Wave is not
gone
in
this list. It is completely gone. I don't know how I feel about that. I guess it's probably right, but
if you're gonna dilute and have not just straight blue mana, I can see not running the devotion cards.
I agree.
I feel like the devotion cards are a little difficult to run unless you're running like legitimate split cost stuff. You see a lot of the old mono red decks running like Boros Reckoner, because that it still counts as your 3 devotion to red. If you're running this deck where you've got Kumena Speakers that doesn't count towards any blue, and then these lords that only count for 1 blue, most of your lords are double blue, so that's what makes the devotion really appealing, is you just get to power out gigantic fields with Master of Waves. This deck doesn't really do that with the green splash, so I can see them not running Master of Waves, and I personally think it's actually pretty nice. You kind of run a little bit lower to the ground. You don't really run those 4s. You pretty much top out at 3. Also makes it easier for vials, because you don't have to worry about, do I tick up a vial to 4? Do I leave it at 3? Pretty much the correct play is going to be leave it at 3.
Now we're going to get started here. This is a turn 1 Curse Catcher. It's a pretty standard start for the Merfolk deck. And it looks like he just drew into a Lord.
That's pretty good start.
Pretty good. It looks like he's just going to go ahead and...
Spreading seas on the creeping tar pit seems a little aggressive.
I think he should just start playing the Lords and just try to get in there.
I imagine Lord on 2 is probably where you want to be in this matchup, because you're not really... The big thing is you're not really going to beat...
That is a Search for Azcanta.
That is the card advantage powerhouse known as Search for Azcanta. You must call it by its proper name, Ethan.
Now, I would be surprised if he didn't...
That is not the Lord I was expecting.
It's not the Lord I was expecting either, but at this point it doesn't really... He has no blockers right now, so it's fine. I do not believe that the green-blue list should be playing this Lord. I believe they have enough Lords that...
Yeah, I definitely think... Because you have... normally with your Merfolk deck, you have your Lord of Atlantis, Master of the Pearl Trident, and then Marrow Regery.
Which they have cut for this card. Now, I believe Marrow Regery just has a higher power level. Being able to tap things down... Marrow Regery is just strictly better. Yeah. Just the access to every single creature I play taps one of yours is just so powerful. It stops board stalls. Mm-hmm. It stops, like, you can use it on lands, so you can... It's just such a versatile card. There's a Cavern of Souls, I imagine, on Merfolk, because why would it be on anything else? I feel like yes.
There's a double Lord, so that is a Curse Catcher swinging for 3. It's getting in there, getting frisky. Didn't see what Sean is looking at on this Search for Azcanta trigger. That the Detention Sphere is an interesting card out of his deck. Do you think he's running the Detention Sphere in the main, or is that a sideboard card?
It's probably a sideboard card. It's a good sideboard card, especially for this Merfolk list where you can easily 2-for-1 your opponent. Detention Sphere hits all creatures or permanents with the same name.
Yeah, so you can definitely do some pretty nuts things like potentially snagging multiple Aether Vials, or if you end up with a start that's particularly one Lord heavy, you can snag a couple Lords with it. Which is pretty good.
It was very good in this particular instance because Tyler was not able to sack that Curse Catcher to counter it because Curse Catcher says instant or sorcery. Mm-hmm. So
that is also true. Having the enchantment-based removal is really good against Curse Catcher, just kind of as a general note. Mm-hmm. Now, the Spreading Seas on the Creeping Tar Pit is actually paying dividends right now.
It looks like
Sean has 2 Liliana.
Yes.
Neither of which he can cast.
And it looks like he just picked up another Spreading Seas, which I believe will probably go on that Godless Shrine.
I would imagine it goes on the Godless Shrine. It's going to be either the Godless Shrine or the Gaia Reach Sanitarium.
The Gaia Reach Sanitarium is kind of a scary card, especially with what Sean's trying to do. That is a Kira, sorry.
Kira Great Glass Spinner. It's a pretty good card. Really gives the Merfolk deck a little bit of protection. It's kind of like a taxes card. Makes it difficult to deal with the board.
So this is an attack for 9 here.
Yep, and then there is a Gaia Reach Sanitarium activation. So we'll see what they pull off of this. I imagine Tyler just wants to... It looks like he picked up a Tidebinder Mage? Or Harbinger of the Tides. Harbinger of the Tides. So I imagine he probably pitches the Harbinger. Oh, and Sean has had enough.
Yes.
Sean knows when his goose is cooked, and he would rather take Game 3 on the play and just kind of, see if he can get a bit of a better start. I wonder how many payoffs he has in his deck.
I would assume quite a few. I would assume
because Game 1 we saw what I would assume is kind of the nuts. Mm-hmm. Just get a Primus into your graveyard super early. That chart, of course, did work, and then being able to just on turn 3 on curve get back Woodfall Primus, just absolutely crush the resource base of your opponent, and then from there just kind of leverage that big body. that game, a little bit clunkier, sitting on a couple Lilianas. I almost wonder if he sideboarded into more of a control deck, which would be interesting. It wouldn't necessarily surprise me. I imagine that at least to some degree his sideboard is more control deck oriented than necessarily like different combo pieces. Though you would assume he has different things that he can get back.
I would assume so. I was wondering if he's running the Protean Hulk combo as well in this deck. I don't believe he is, from what I've seen. I think he's just trying to get value off these Goryo's footsteps.
The question is, what other targets does he have to hit?
No.
Ooh, it looks like that is a 6 with a Goryo's footsteps of the Goryo and 2 Lilianas. That is not where you want to be. I definitely think, anything that has more than a single Liliana, you're not really interested in. And unless you have something really good and really aggressive to start with, I'm just not sure. Going down to 5, I would imagine Sean's probably a huge dog in this race.
Now, another interesting card that he might have is Obsidian Ghost Council, because
that would be an interesting choice. Normally you see the Obsidian in like a traditional or like a Esper Gorya's Vengeance deck.
Right. But it would still work the same way in this deck as it would in the Gorya's Vengeance deck, because he would be able to
before the trigger for sacking, he would be able to exile it.
And he's already in Esper colors, so he would be able to play it just naturally. Now they're going to go ahead and get started. Turn 1, Creeping Tar Pit for Sean, and it looks like a Kamina speaker for...
I imagine it's a Kamina speaker. Probably trying to get his aggro on a little bit this game. Try to maybe show... Oh, no, we are
curse
wrong.
Catcher.
That was a turn 1 curse catcher again. It'll be interesting to see if Sean manages to pull Chart a Course. Is it worth it to sack... Ooh, that is a Search for Azcanta. That's pretty good for Sean. Can't be interacted with by the curse catcher, so it's pretty safe there. The real question is, can he actually leverage the Search for Azcanta this game? Last game didn't really do a whole lot for him, just kind of dead on board with it. It'll be interesting to see if this game he can actually get something going with it. We'll also see if Tyler continues his spree of spreading seas. Literally everything. Literally everything. I've been on Sean's side of the table on that one. It's never fun getting chain spreading seas game in, game out. It just feels awful. Even if you're playing a blue deck, it's just brutal.
Now it looks like Tyler is stuck. No, he's just trying to... Sorry, we're on Sean's turn here. My bad.
We are on Sean's turn. He's currently resolving a Serum Visions.
Okay.
If you didn't see that one. Looks like he did bin a Liliana off of the Search for Azcanta, which is pretty interesting. He binned it pretty quick, so I imagine he either already has one or realizes he's probably never going to cast it at this rate.
I feel like Liliana of the Veil is not a great card in this matchup, in all honesty.
That is a very pretty Silvergill item.
It is. Those are the promo, game day promo Silvergills, I believe.
Yes, that is the foil full art. It is a very, very pretty art. Makes me almost want to pick up a playset, but then I would feel obligated to play Merfolk, and I don't think anybody needs that in their life.
Sean's deciding what to do here. It looks like he kept that card off of the search trigger.
Looks like it was a land. Is that? Yes, that was a flooded strand. The real question is, how aggressively does he fetch with this? Does he have something that he could play this turn with it, or does he just want to wait on it and try to make any spreading seas that are in Tyler's hand kind of irrelevant?
Well, if he doesn't have to use it right now, I would just say he's going to wait on it.
Looks like he's thinking about it.
He's thinking about something at least. Looks like he is going to sack that Flooded Strand.
I imagine he's probably going to take 3 here. He probably wants to get that black source.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there it is. The question is, what does he have to play this turn? Because there's a very high chance that Tyler is sitting on a Spreading Seas, just based on how these games are going.
I believe Tyler does have another Spreading Seas in his hand.
That would be what, the 5th in 3 games? That's
It's a lot of
pretty.
Spreading Seas.
That's pretty crazy.
That is a Collective Brutality. It
Collective
looks
Brutality pitching. Was that an Ashen Rider?
I believe so.
Woo!
Ashen Rider is not a bad one.
That is a pretty good hit for your Footsteps of the Goryo. And looks like Sean not going for the duress mode, just going for draining and killing the creature. Can't say I blame him. Got to try to keep the merfolk from getting set up if you can.
Now, Ashen Rider says when it enters the battlefield or dies, exile target permanent. So that hits lands as well, and it does almost the same thing as Woodfall Primus. Except it doesn't stick around.
Effectively the same thing. It not leaving you with a body makes it probably a little bit worse, but at the same time, it also gives you the ability to exile rather than just destroy, which is super valuable against a lot of decks. I imagine if he ever runs up against Dredge, he probably would much rather see Ashen Rider than Woodfall Primus. And we were correct. Tyler did have another Spreading Seas for that.
Of course he did.
For that Godless Shrine. It's what we call bad beats.
Now that is a very powerful card. Engineer Explosives on 2. Now that is a very smart.
Yeah, good choice by Sean. It kind of puts Tyler into a bad situation because any 2-mana Lord that he plays, like for instance, or even that Silvergill Adept that he just played, they're gonna go away.
Most of the powerful cards in the Merfolk deck are 2-drop cards, so
also importantly, all of those Spreading Seas are 2 mana.
That is true too.
So if he goes to pop this at the end of Tyler's turn, not only does he mop up that Silvergill Adept, but he also clears the way for his mana and gets him to the point where he can actually play what I believe is that Liliana that is still sitting there.
I don't know if Liliana's good in this particular situation, but
I mean,
now
he's going to play a second Curse Catcher.
Another thing to consider here is that it would also get rid of his Search for Azcanta.
The question, I guess the real question is, does he have enough in his graveyard to flip the Search for Azcanta?
That is a good question.
Because if he has enough to flip Search for Azcanta, there's a good chance that he just waits, flips his Search for Azcanta, and then from there pops it so that he actually gets to keep the land and keep the card advantage powerhouse that is Azcanta the land.
Mm-hmm. That's really where the powerful...
Yeah, that looks like that's what he's lining up to do. Doesn't look like he's interested in destroying his Search. And I imagine, based on the fact that he fetched the Watery Grave tapped, I imagine that means that his Search is due to flip. Because if he was more than a turn off, I imagine he would have popped it. Because he can't really afford to wait any longer.
And that's exactly what he's going to do.
Looks like that's an Unburial Rites.
It is. It is indeed.
That is a pretty good card right here. The question is, does he have enough mana? Does not look like he has enough mana to pop Engineered Explosives and cast Unburial Rites. But he does have mana available to cast Unburial Rites. Flashing back that Unburial Rites, getting back that Ashen Rider would be really good here.
He needs to be careful about these Curse Catchers, though. I don't believe he has enough mana to...
Doesn't have enough to combat both, but he can get through one of them. And he can make Tyler get rid of both of them, which is very important.
Yeah, might be a good play. We'll see if Sean does that.
It could just be as simple as pop the explosives, unlock his black mana, and then just play Liliana.
I believe that's what he's going to do.
Because that's also a pretty good line. Liliana can effectively, will at the very least clear away one of the Curse Catchers, and then ties up the combat for one of them. So Tyler is heavily incentivized to get this Liliana off the board right now.
Now he probably is going to put it on. Yes, yeah, he's going to put that.
Yeah, there's really no sense in not hitting the Azcanta with the Spreading Seas there. Letting Sean untap with that Azcanta is just super dangerous. Now, I will say things are getting pretty risky for Tyler here, because he
needs to be careful.
You imagine Sean's probably going to untap and cast that Unburial Rites.
I believe he will.
And I think Ashen Rider's probably good enough on this board right now.
It's a 4/4 flyer that exiles a permanent. That's probably a pretty good play. Let's see what...
And even if Tyler manages to play Dismember, which I believe is the only actual piece of removal he's running, the Ashen Rider still takes something with it on the way out the door, which is what makes it super powerful. Like you said, it's kind of that Woodfall Primus-esque effect where like you just get quite a bit of value. Ooh, and there's a Gyreach Sanitarium. So now he can get that Unburial Rites through the Curse Catcher easily.
He could have gotten through already. It is 4 off the flashback. That's a Footsteps of Goryo in his hand. So I think he's trying to decide if he wants to footstep or if he wants to...
I guess the real question is, does he want to keep the Ashen Rider? I think probably what the play is if he footsteps it this turn, he can Unburial Rites it next turn, which gets him to take 3 things off the board.
And that's what he's going to do.
And not only does he take 3 things off the board, but then at the end of the day, it still leaves him with the flyer.
It does.
It's a pretty clean play, and it's a very, very timely top deck for Sean. Also leaves him empty-handed, so he can tick up this Liliana without any worry.
Getting that Ashen Rider.
Okay. Enter the battlefield trigger. Exiles a Master of the Pearl Trident. And he ticks up the Liliana. Everything going about as we expected it to. And then on the way out...
step, it's going to exile that Curse Catcher.
And now we have a clean board, except Sean has a Liliana.
Now, I'm a little surprised that Sean didn't go after that green source, except for that Curse Catcher. It makes sense that he goes after the small threat, but I would try and take Turtle off of his green mana.
I think, based on what Sean has seen of the deck, I don't think the green splash is really threatening. I think he would rather clear the board so that the Liliana is safe for another turn, because I think right now he's kind of on the ride the Liliana of the Veil to Victory plan. And here we see exactly what we were talking about, getting back the Unburial Rites. He gets to exile that Marrow Reejery, and then I'm pretty sure there's a Marrow Reejery that he played.
I was talking about Sean's hand. I believe that's a Path to Exile that he has in his hand.
That is indeed.
That is interesting that he went for the Path to Exile there.
I imagine he just went for it so he could tick up the Liliana.
I believe so.
Also, I think Turtle put the Curse Catcher... Oh, he probably sacked the Curse Catcher, which makes sense. I mean, it's kind of a minor thing. I think I would have just let the path resolve.
Well, I believe Turtle had all 3 of his islands or had the 3rd island that was in his deck in his hand. So that is a Harbinger of the Tide. Harbinger. Thank you. That's going to bounce the Ashen Rider back to.
I think bouncing Ashen Rider there is very risky, and it only serves to give Tyler a little bit of a cushion. But now. That's interesting. I would have imagined how much to convert a mana cost in Ashen Rider is it?
8.
8.
8.
Oof. Okay, so Sean's still a couple off.
Now, I assume we're going to just see Liliana tick down here.
It's probably the safest
going to
thing.
probably fire up this Creeping Tar Pit here. Or
Ooh,
Charter Course.
Charter Course. That's a pretty good draw. Did he draw another Footsteps of the Goryo?
I believe.
And a Woodfall Primus? That's pretty good. Tick down. What did he draw?
I did not get. It's an Ashen Rider, I believe. Another Ashen Rider.
Ooh,
Get in for 3.
that's a little rough. He at least got that Creeping Tar Pit in there. Those Creeping Tar Pits have been very, very sad tar pits. Not really doing much
Was that a
these past
breeding-
couple games.
Was that a breeding pool that he just drew? I believe it was. Not drawing well here.
Tyler is on cold nothing. I believe the only card he has in hand
Is an
Aether Vial. It honestly begs the question: do you just play the Aether Vial, or do you feign having something? I think it's probably better to just play the Aether Vial, because you know you're gonna get Liliana ticked up on you. It's
It
it's
allows
just
your
sitting
things
there.
to play for free if the Liliana's on board. Like,
Also allows you to work around any potential counter magic.
I agree.
Ooh, another Curse Catcher. That is not.
Not what Turtle wants to see. I don't think anything that Turtle draws in this scenario is going to actually save him. I believe.
This is probably not going to end well for the Fishmen. It is probably a slow decline into madness, and madness being losing to the Jank.
The Jank.
That said, we do finally, maybe, get an Azcanta activated. That first one got Spreading Seas pretty quickly, but this one is around and looks like it might get to actually do its thing. Never mind. We're just gonna see Creeping Tar Pit. Creeping Tar Pit is planning to go the distance. I think this is probably the game.
I would believe.
And there it is. That is the game. The Fishmen couldn't quite get there. Liliana of the Veil proving that she really is just a good card.
She is a very good card.
It doesn't matter what kind of shell you're playing her in. You know, you can play her in Jund or Abzan or you know,
Grixis
throw
Shadow,
her in your
any-
Death Shadow deck. But really, you know, just play something spicy.
The reason why
Throw
she's-
Liliana's in the spice and it'll work.
Reason why she's $80. We have about 15 minutes left. We're going to go see if there are any matches that we can put on camera for you guys.
See if maybe we can snag a game 3. Modern is a pretty quick format, so but well, hopefully we can find something. So we will be right back. Alright, welcome everybody up to the booth. We are actually done with round 2 already. Both of our feature matches were the last matches waiting, so round 1, you're able to get right into round 2 pretty quick. And right now they're actually just pairing up for round 3. So hopefully we'll have a match pretty quick for you guys. It's been an interesting night so far. See, Martyr proc, don't really see that very often. And then the spice that is Footsteps of the Goryo out of Sean Carroll. It's a treat to watch. Also some tidy dredge piloting. Just pretty good night of Magic so far. So we're actually working on pairings for round 3 right now. We will be right back with a round 3 pairing for you. Hopefully we got something good. And welcome back, everybody. We've got an interesting matchup this time. Another pretty good one. We're getting there. They are both 1-1, correct?
I believe so.
Why is there no? Sure. I'm confused.
That seems
And
fine.
then they're correct sides, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. We are good. We are good.
Alright, so we'll go ahead and get into this. Looks like they've already resolved who's playing first. We'll see if they mulligan at all. and we'll go ahead and let them get started. So Brandon on the right here is playing the 5-color Traverse the Ulvenwald Death Shadow deck. It's a pretty interesting deck. Ideally, you want to be on powering out Death Shadows and large Tarmogoyfs and just kind of applying pressure. You're almost a zoo deck with Traverse for some added card selection and just card advantage in general.
Using the very powerful Death Shadow, which I believe he has in his hand, and a couple Tarmogoyfs. Ryan is going to search up a Stomping Ground.
Now, he told us he's on a Rug Tempo deck.
He said it was Sea Stompy.
Sea Stompy.
Sea Stompy. I'm not entirely sure what he meant by that, but that is
we'll find out.
Nam Nam Renegade.
Narnam.
I'm going to call it Nam Nam.
That is a 1/2 with the Depth Touch with a Revolt trigger.
I believe he did have a Revolt trigger. So
he did indeed. So it comes in with an extra counter. So it's a 1 mana 2/3 with Death Touch. It's really relevant. Can be kind of aggressive, but at the same time also plays defense exceptionally well.
Brandon's already down to 14. Doing what his deck is supposed to be doing.
That is the power of the Death Shadow deck.
Now, Brandon has advocated that this is better than the Grixis list because he's able to play... Oh, he's fumbling his cards a little bit.
Ooh.
He's able to play both... it's more of a mixture between the Grixis list and the Jund list. It's probably closer to the Jund list than the Grixis list, but he's still able to play Stubborn Denial, which is a very powerful card in this deck.
The biggest thing I would say with the variants of Death Shadow, obviously when the Death Shadow deck became big originally after the banning of Gitaxian Probe, the big thing was just kind of just jamming it into a traditional Jund shell. And then that deck has since evolved, and now most of the time you see, obviously people in the Grixis Death Shadow, the more like kind of a Delver deck, really, where you're just kind of, you've got your, normally about 8 threats, you've got your 4 Death Shadows, and then 4 of some number of Gurmag Angler and Tassiger the Golden Fang. This deck plays a lot more like a kind of like a zoo toolbox deck, really, because you've got access to, obviously it is 5-color Death Shadow, so you do have access to cards from every shade, and you get access to some pretty powerful things for this archetype.
Right.
For instance, Stubborn Denial, as Ethan already mentioned, basically being 1 mana negate for most of the creatures in your deck, and then Ranger of Eos and or Lingering Souls, which are really good for like the mirrors. Anything that wants to 1-for-1 removal you. Having access to all of those tools is really the draw of this 5-color deck. You kind of get to play a little bit of the tempo game, but at the same time, you have some pretty nutty aggro draws.
Now, I am wondering if Ryan doesn't think that Brandon might be on traditional Jund here, because he's getting pretty aggressive with that Narnam Renegade.
Yeah, he might not know that he's up against Death Shadow yet.
I'm surprised that he's being as aggressive, because he's going to make those he's just making those Death Shadows much bigger.
Now the real question is, how long does Brandon kind of keep the secret? Like, at some point he's going to play a card, or just play the Death Shadow itself that'll give away. Right now it looks like his hand is, I see 2 Tarmogoyfs and a Liliana of the Veil, so it's a very traditional Jund hand, and even the Abrupt Decay he just cast is very traditional Jund.
If I was Ryan, I would be thinking I'm just playing Jund right now, in all honesty.
Now obviously we don't know if they're like playtest partners, so he could know already, and then, but that does make the swinging with the Narnam Renegade looks a little less appealing if you know your opponent's on Death Shadow.
You're right, exactly.
Looks like he's trying to figure out what land to play for turn. Looks like I see
It looks like he has quite a few options.
I do see a Steam Vents.
That
Also,
looks like
Steam Vents is the play. I believe he'll actually be down to 8.
Yes.
As soon as they correct the dice on the top of the screen there.
These players are being very loose with their life totals.
I'm gonna imagine that the paper record that Brandon is keeping is a little bit closer.
Now, what is that?
What indeed?
I'm going to go and check and see what he just played because I don't know what card that was.
4 mana, destroy all lands. That's modern legal? That is interesting. Still can't read that. This is an interesting card. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm not sure if that actually helps his case right now. That Tarmogoyf is getting really big, and all it takes is one fatal push, just anything really to clear that Narnum Renegade out of there, and then Brandon will just be off to the races.
Did you see it?
Couldn't read it.
That? Okay.
What card is that, Ethan?
Ryan just played Thoughts of Ruin, which is a card I have never seen played in any format ever. So it reads...
So what you're telling me is we should rename his deck to Spicy.
I guess. So what Thoughts of Ruin says, it's a 4 mana red, 2 red and 2 colorless. And it reads, each player sacrifices lands equal to the number of cards in your hand.
That is a very interesting card.
It is very interesting.
I'm not sure if it actually is turning out very well for Ryan, though. Because, Brandon came out of that with this Death Shadow, and Ryan kind of just sputtered out. I think that card is great on an empty board if you have something to rebuild from it immediately, or if you know your opponent doesn't have any resources. But in the state that they were in, the virtual parity that they were at the time, I just don't know if that's worth the risk. On the bright side for Ryan, he definitely knows what he's up against now.
But I think it might be a little too late. He needs to find a blocker now.
And a removal spell doesn't do it, because Brandon did show that he has a Stubborn Denial in hand to go with his 2 Tarmogoyfs and a Liliana and Lord knows what else. But that Stubborn Denial should do a pretty good job of keeping that Death Shadow safe and swinging. And that is Rug Tempo has had enough. It played its spice, and it went, and it said, okay, I'm done. We're good. On to the next. So we'll see what kind of things they bring in out of sideboard. The Traverse Shadow deck, sideboard can be wildly different depending on player preference.
Now, I believe he's probably going to be bringing in the Ranger of Eos and the Lingering Souls in this matchup. You typically want to bring... Ryan seems to be on more of a mid-rangey list, so that's... looks like he brought in a Disdainful Stroke, too.
Disdainful Stroke seems fine. At the very least, you could maybe use it to snipe the spice, as we could say. You also, based on what he saw out of Ryan, with his kind of, aggressive drops coupled with some counter magic, you might not know whether or not he's on any number of Cryptic Command. Disdainful Stroke's pretty good against Cryptic Command. So maybe he's thinking of trying to turn into kind of more of a tempo deck himself, more so than this toolbox deck. We'll really see how this game evolves going into game 2. I also imagine Ryan will bring in some kind of graveyard hate, because it certainly seems like Brandon makes much greater use out of his graveyard than Ryan.
I believe so. I don't really know what Ryan would be bringing in his colors against this deck. The issue that Rugg has always had in the past is not having the greatest sideboard options, especially when it comes to like graveyards or
You're
removal.
pretty much just like stuck on burn-based removal, which is not the greatest against Death Shadows and Tarmogoyfs. And then as far as graveyard hate goes, you're basically stuck on the artifact graveyard hate. You've got your obviously your Grafdigger's Cages and Relic of Progenitus are the two biggest ones. So it'll be interesting to see what he has and if he brings it in. Who knows? Maybe his sideboard plan is to go a little bit lower to the ground. If he brings in, maybe he's got like, probably not Wild Nacatl, but you know, other 1 mana 2 to 3 power creatures. Maybe he runs some number of Delver. You never really know. There's a lot that he could be running that we have not seen. It's an interesting list, and it's something kind of new, or I guess could be something kind of old that he's bringing about. That he's kind of tweaked himself, but you know, 5-color Shadow will do what Shadow does. We'll see if he keeps a reasonable hand with some lands and some spells and probably some discard, as the Death Shadow decks tend to have.
Looks like Ryan's taking a mulligan here.
Looks like Brandon is okay with his. I think I see 3 land.
I see a Stubborn Denial.
I think I see 3 land, Stubborn Denial. I think I saw a Mishra's Bauble as well.
Mishra's Bauble.
And maybe Inquisition of Kozilek?
Seems like a good hand, a starting hand. Not a lot of action going on, but a lot of ways to kind of set your hand up and mess up what your opponent's trying to do.
Yeah, seems like a disruption-heavy hand, which disruption-heavy hands for the Death Shadow deck tend to be pretty good, because like you will find your threat eventually. It's just a matter of how aggressive do you need to be in the matchup. If he's thinking maybe, you know, I can afford to be the control deck in this matchup, or I can afford to let him take the driver's seat and me just react, then, you know, a slower hand might not matter.
That is a Noble Hierarch.
This deck gets more and more interesting to me by the minute. So he has Narnam Renegade and Tarmogoyf, and I imagine some number of Lightning Bolt. So you would think he'd be maybe on this like Revolt Zoo type strategy, which we've seen a little bit of that deck in a just straight green red or a Naya shell. But he could have found something that makes the blue splash worth it other than Remand, which is, if I remember correctly, the only blue card we saw that game.
I saw a Mana Leak.
And he had a Mana Leak in hand. It's an interesting combination of things.
An Inquisition of Kozilek.
Also, I'm very interested that he is doing this now and not... Is that a
Molten Rain? And I believe that is that card that we saw last game. So yeah. I believe you probably take the Narnam Renegade here.
You either take the Narnam Renegade or you take the Molten Rain.
I believe
not taking the Molten Rain could be risky.
Well, you can't cast the Molten Rain here because it costs double red, I believe.
It does, but do you really want to be on
yes.
Please don't draw a red source?
I do.
When you are stuck on 1 land.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I thought Molten Rain cost double red. Or is that just Stone Rain?
Yeah, it costs double red.
Might want to get down there.
I'm going to get down there.
We will get that corrected, because that is incorrect. We'll wind this back a turn or two here. See if we can whoop. See if we can get this rewound correctly. since he cannot cast the Molten Rain. So get life totals corrected here. Get them to wind the turn back a little bit. See if maybe that changes the play at all. Because I imagine having the second land might change Brandon's turn at least a little bit. I guess not. I guess they're okay with moving forward as is, just minus the Molten Rain. There is a basic island. That is an interesting inclusion out of this 5-color deck. Normally they run basic swamp and basic forest, because those are the two basics that you want to be seeing. Obviously you want to be able to cast your discard cards and your Tarmogoyfs. But basic island, that's interesting. I guess he wants to be able to cast his Stubborn Denials through Blood Moon, which is kind of an interesting thought. I would think probably maybe out of the sideboard, if he thinks he was going to face up against a Blood Moon out of this deck. There you go. Get that Overgrown Tomb in there. Looked like for a second there he was thinking of going Godless Shrine untapped so that he could get a Lingering Souls going, but I think playing a Tarmogoyf is probably better on this board. Ooh, and there is that mana leak that Ethan was talking about earlier. But that is quickly met by a Stubborn Denial. That is the power of that card. There's just something about a Force Spike. And now that Tarmogoyf is out, it is 1 mana negate. And that is a very, very powerful Magic card. Especially in these Death Shadow decks that are so good at just bringing out cheap, powerful creatures. Just having 1 mana negate, being able to go Death Shadow, hold up 1 mana negate is just absurd.
I'm back. I had to take care of the drafters as well.
You missed the mana leak you mentioned earlier. Ryan tried to mana leak this Tarmogoyf that is going to town, and it was met by the Stubbornest of Denials.
Ah.
Good card, that Stubby D.
That is a Lingering Souls. That is a very good Magic card.
That is probably the best card that this deck has access to as far as grinding goes. As much power as you can get out of tutoring for random traverse targets. Once you turn on Delirium, the real grind out of this deck is you just get Lingering Souls Liliana going, and then you're just playing good old Abzan. You just happen to have 1 mana negate in your Abzan deck. It's pretty good, I would say.
I'm wondering if Ryan's going to be casting this Molten Rain here, or if he's going to cast that other card that we saw last turn. But he also has a Snapcaster in his hand, I believe. Now, I think
does the land destruction do it right now?
I don't believe it does, and I think it's going to just get Stubborn Denied, or he's just going to let it happen. Okay.
I don't think he cares too much about the Overgrown Tomb at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think the board that Brandon has amassed is threatening enough that he doesn't necessarily care about that one specific land. I think the only land that he probably could have gone after that might have elicited the Stubborn Denial would be probably the Godless Shrine. I don't imagine he's running too many white sources. Normally these decks only run 1, maybe 2.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine the Godless Shrine's probably the most important land that he has out at the moment. But, now that these Lingering Soul tokens are out of the way, I'm not sure he even cares about that Godless Shrine.
I'm not sure if he does either. Let's see what he plays here.
I will say if he plays the land sweep card, that will be Stubborn Denial,
yes.
in a heartbeat.
Well, actually, I don't even think it will be, because that would put Ryan much farther behind than it would Brandon.
That's fair. I think Brandon has just amassed too much board presence at this point. I don't know what kind of sweeper effects Ryan may be running. There is a Mishra's Bauble looking at the top of Ryan's deck.
Didn't get a good look at it.
We'll see. Seems to be okay with it.
It puts an artifact in the graveyard, so
that
Tarmogoyf,
probably turns on Delirium as well.
It probably does. So
And
that's an attack for 9.
And it
I would
looks
assume Ryan would have to. This is just a Snapcaster blocker. It looks like. I believe he targeted
looks like he targeted
Mana Leak.
Maybe seeing if he can snag whatever the post combat play is. Brandon forgot whose turn it was for a second there. I believe it's 4 to 9. Oof. Birds of Paradise is not what Ryan was looking for. Saves him a point of damage off of a Lingering Souls token, but if he doesn't have something, he is down to 1 here. It's beginning to look like this might be a tidy 2-0 for the Death Shadow deck.
It's looking like it. One piece of removal wins it for him, I believe.
Yeah. Any removal wins it, and untapping for his following turn probably wins it at this point. I'm just not sure what Ryan can pull out, unless he is sandbagging and Izzet Staticaster in his hand, which we know he's not. So he's just.
So he'll be taking 3 here, puts him down to 1.
Do you even play any of that? No, playing a Death Shadow.
Just extending that board.
And Ryan did not look particularly excited about that. Kind of just there is the
GGs.
hand.
All right.
Shadow with a tidy 2-0 of the Rug Tempo deck. Still not really sure what Ryan was trying to do
really
there.
Sure either.
It just seems like he was trying to do some interesting things, but I just don't know if the deck he's trying to play is well positioned in Modern.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to go down and look and see if we can find another game we can put on stream for you guys. We have about 20. I'm sure we could probably
Hopefully we can find at least one more.
When I was down there,
this is Modern.
Yeah.
The games do tend to go pretty quick, and we'll see if we're not the first ones done this time compared to
see.
the last ones, the last couple rounds.
And we will be right back. Welcome to Friday Night Magic.
We are ready
Yay.
for this spectacle that is, unfortunately for Ethan, Lantern versus 5-color Death Shadow. I'm excited for this.
I'm not.
This is just going to be quality fun. And I've already talked to Brandon and told him that he at least has to let one game go and not concede. So we will get to see Lantern in all of its glory at least once.
Yay.
Lantern's a fun deck, man.
I don't know how you define fun, but it's not that.
It is. Lantern Control is the prison deck for Modern.
You're not wrong.
And it is just... Sitting across from it is not very fun, but watching it in action, in my opinion, is very fun. And frankly, I think watching good pilots of it is also pretty fun. Because there are a lot of weird things that happen with the deck.
There seems to be some confusion here.
Did Brandon already... Did he accidentally pull an extra card?
He might have.
He might have accidentally redrawn 7. I do believe he was already mulliganing.
I think they're coming over to...
Yeah, I do believe he made a mistake while mulliganing. Already pulled a 7. So we will get this resolved real quick. I imagine if he hasn't looked yet, it'll just be a matter of burying that one card and going from there. We'll see. Looks like he will just shuffle up and redraw a 6. That is also a fine resolution. Speeds us right along. Looks like Benjamin also went down to 6. So they are both down a card. Now these are both decks that run some number of Thoughtseize and or Inquisition of Kozilek. So it'll be interesting to see if whoever is on the draw starts at a virtual 5. So we will see how this goes. There he goes down to 6. Definitely saw a Thoughtseize in there. So we'll see who's on the play. And
so Brandon looked at a new 7 there, and it's simple ruling. Just have him shuffle that 7 back into his hand and draw a new 6.
Does he go for Thoughtseize on turn 1?
I would see why not. I don't see why not.
I would say the only thing that he could possibly do, rather than go for the Thoughtseize on 1, would be maybe if he wanted to be cheeky, he could hold up for Stubborn Denial.
Sure, but I think Thoughtseize is just the better card here. So it looks like we got a mainboard Grafdigger's Cage, a Pithing Needle, and an Inquisition.
Gotta love that Lantern Control deck. It runs the sideboard hate cards in the main board.
That is interesting. So I think you just take Inquisition here. I don't think you care about either one of those artifact cards.
Yeah. Main deck, Brandon does not run any of the Lingering Souls, and as far as I know, he doesn't run any Snapcaster Mages. So that Grafdigger's Cage is basically the only hate card that he does not care about at all. Also interesting, he cracks the Mishra's Bauble and looks at the top of Ben's deck. So
he
he's
gets
now
perfect information here.
He's now playing with perfect information. I guess the real question is...
wondering what he's putting that Pithing Needle on.
Now, I'm not 100% sure. I would venture to guess probably Liliana of the Veil.
Probably Liliana.
He did cheekily mention to me that if he played a Pithing Needle, he would name Abandon All Hope, just for fun. I doubt he would do that in game 1 with no lock pieces on the board, but... I'm
going to go double check and see what that Pithing Needle is on.
So we will see what this Pithing Needle is on. And also, we will need to get them to correct life totals, because Brandon should be at 15 because of the Thoughtseize. And
So
there we go.
That Pithing Needle is on Polluted Delta, actually.
That is an interesting card.
That is some next level stuff right there.
That is, I'm not sure if that's the correct play.
Well,
The 4 and 5 color Death Shadow decks play such a variety of different fetches. I'm not sure you can safely name a specific one and think you're going to hit more than 1 or 2 cards.
you're right. But it really comes down to either naming Liliana, which he doesn't know if he's playing in the main, or hitting a fetch land. So it could potentially be, destroy a land in this particular instance.
I mean, that is a fair point. I'm interested to see what Benjamin gets going here, because Brandon is kind of off to the races. He already has a very good threat in that Tarmogoyf and a decent enough threat in a 2/2 Death Shadow. Obviously, you would like that to be a little bit larger, but if our previous match with the Death Shadow deck is any indication, you know that that life total can drop in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine Benjamin's really hurting for an Ensnaring Bridge right now. Ensnaring Bridge is probably the most important lock piece out of this Lantern control deck. It basically makes it so that these creature decks can't really do what they want to do. They're not swinging when you have an Ensnaring Bridge out. But with no Ensnaring Bridge, that is some pretty bad beats coming in from Tarmogoyf and friend. Or I guess Death Shadow and friend.
There's an Ensnaring Bridge, and that is going to be quickly stubborn.
That is the fastest Stubborn Denial I have ever seen.
And that is a Lantern of Insight. Now, I'm surprised he countered that first Lantern of Insight.
I'm not particularly surprised. Countering that first Lantern doesn't really matter as much, because all it really, at that point he couldn't play Ensnaring Bridge if he even had it in hand. So it's a pretty safe counter, and also just gives you an extra turn of denying them a lock piece. I think that's the important thing when thinking about countering that Lantern. Is just the longer you can deny them the lock, the better you are. Also, I'm interested that Brandon didn't play a land for turn, because if he had played a land, he had lethal.
Well, he can't play. It looks like he just has 2 Polluted Deltas in hand.
Oh, that is true. That is the awkward moment where the Pithing Needle actually did the nuts.
Yeah.
That is pretty funny. What are the odds of that? Maybe he knows something about this deck list that we don't.
Maybe. Now, this is Pyrite Spellbomb.
And
that's a scoop.
That is a concession from Lantern. Couldn't get any of the lock pieces going. Really just that double Stubborn Denial from Brandon's side. Having 2 of those cards for the 5-color Shadow deck just really brutalized the game plan of Lantern control player. I'm interested to see maybe if for game 2 he takes more of a aggressive mulligan into lock pieces strategy, and tries to like power out an Ensnaring Bridge, or really just go for like the hard Lantern plus Codex Shredder plus Pixis of Pandemonium lock. Who knows? Maybe we're in for the world's shortest Lantern control match, and Ethan can go and be happy, and I can be salty that we didn't get to see Lantern control in all of its prison-y glory.
Now, sideboarding, What do you think each player brings in here?
So I imagine for the 5-color shadow deck, I would probably not bring in any of the white cards. As tempting as it could be to say bringing in Lingering Souls could allow you to fight through a ensnaring bridge, and bringing in like Ranger of Eos could help you fight through a Lantern Lock, but at the same time I think you want to reduce mana constraints. I think that's your big thing. I think you want to try to make your mana as lean as possible, and I think you kind of want to be on like a Sultai plan. I think you want to lean away from red cards unless he's running Culligan's Command, and I think you want to lean away from the white cards, and I think you want to be primarily on play a Tarmogoyf, play a Death Shadow, and then just Stubborn Denial. Just as we saw in that game 1, Stubborn Denial plus one good body can carry the game.
Do you think Brandon has any Stony Silences or anything like that in the sideboard?
I kind of doubt he's running Stony Silence specifically.
Looks like an Ancient Grudge is something.
Ancient Grudge is probably a really good card here. It's probably, like I said, Culligan's Command, Ancient Grudges are probably the only 2 red cards that you really want to be seeing here. I also noticed he had a Pithing Needle, which is a pretty good pull here. He can Pithing Needle any of the, like, he could Pithing Needle Inventor's Fair is a good name. Any of the actual Lantern pieces other than Lantern itself is really good to name with Pithing Needle. If Benjamin just has a hand that goes, if he goes play a Darksteel Citadel, play a Lantern of Insight off of this Darksteel Citadel, play a Mox Opal, play a Codex Shredder, and you just name Codex Shredder, then you just basically lock the prison player out of doing what he wants to do. So I imagine the Pithing Needle comes in. Any of the counter magic that's relevant goes in. Like if he has extra Stubborn Denials, I would bet those go in for sure. I would venture to guess. It's also I'm also interested to see what Benjamin has in his sideboard, because the Lantern deck primarily plays like a green-black deck. A lot of them will splash blue for like Whir of Invention, helps you tutor for your artifacts, but for the most part they're kind of like a green-black prison deck where they're running Ancient Stirrings and Thoughtseizes and Inquisitions to help them kind of like lower the cards in hand count.
Right.
So I'm interested to see what he brings in. If maybe he goes, if he has anything that bring in to go lower to the ground. Maybe he did have that Botanical Sanctum, so maybe he has counter magic of his own that he wants to bring in. Kind of try to protect his lock pieces a little bit. Because Grafdigger's Cage plus, Dispel. Just having Dispels up to, because any of the interaction that Brandon's likely to have is probably going to be instant speed. And having, like, if he gets a Grafdigger's Cage down and then counters an Ancient Grudge, that is a huge tempo swing for this matchup. I also imagine any Welding Jars he has come in for sure.
Definitely. It's taking a while for them to sideboard here.
I think Brandon is not entirely sure what he wants to bring in either. Looks like, from what I saw there, looks like he brought out his Lilianas.
Okay.
Which is probably a fair assessment. Liliana doesn't really help you in this matchup. It almost helps the Lantern player. Because you can't really plus her profitably. Because anytime you plus the Liliana, you're actually advancing the Lantern player's game plan. Even more so than your own, I would say. And the Edict effect really does nothing in this matchup, because the Lantern control deck basically plays 0 creatures.
I don't think it plays any creatures at all.
Some lists are running like Glint Nest Crane, just as an additional artifact tutor.
I can see that.
Obviously, I'm not 100% sure whether or not Benjamin is running Glint Nest Crane specifically, but Edict effect probably not what you want for this matchup as a general note.
Right.
Ooh, also, Padim, Console of Innovation. That is a card that the Lantern decks normally run. Giving your artifacts hexproof is very, very valuable.
That is... Yeah, that seems like it would be pretty good.
But again, we haven't seen any creatures out of Benjamin's list, so he may or may not be running them. I would venture to guess, though, if he does have Padim, Padim comes in here.
Mm-hmm.
Just Padim plus Welding Jar, try to kind of turbo out combo and protect it as best you can. Looks like in his hand, looks like I saw a couple Blackcleave Cliffs, a Spire of Industry. Ooh, and off to the races we go. That is a Lantern of Insight on 1.
So
This is where he wants to be.
Interesting. Brandon did bring in the Lingering Souls.
That's interesting. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Oh, there's a Welding Jar and a Mishra's Bauble.
Are we playing
and a
Affinity
Mox
right
Opal.
now?
Woo! That is a tasty Lantern start.
Just dump all hands onto the battlefield. Seems pretty good.
Now, I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with bringing in Lingering Souls.
I don't.
I think the constraints on the mana base, trying to utilize all 5 colors in this deck, are just... it makes things really tight.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think if this is a matchup where you can afford to not be flexible.
I don't think it really advances your clock as much as you want it to either.
Yeah, I think you generally just want to be low to the ground for this matchup. You kind of want to... your 2 main goals are either get in under the lock pieces, so you kind of apply enough pressure that them putting the lock on doesn't really mean as much, or just kind of working on a blow them out of the water, just try to like get all of the artifacts off the board plan.
So he's going to see 0 lands or
zero takeable cards with the Inquisition. That is all lands and a Maelstrom Pulse.
Draws
and
Mishra's
another
Bauble.
Mishra's Bauble. Wow, that is...
It's quite a start.
This is a quality Lantern start. The only thing he's missing now is a Codex Shredder or a Pyxis of Pandemonium or any of the actual shred pieces. Another card that would be great for him would be obviously the Ensnaring Bridge.
Right.
But one thing that he has this game that he didn't have the previous game, which is really valuable, is that Mox Opal. Just being able to cheat on mana ever so much is super valuable here. That is a second Lantern that he just drew. And there's an Ancient Stirrings. I imagine he probably plays the Stirrings first.
I believe so, yes.
Because I think if he can pick up a...
Looks like an Ensnaring Bridge is the pickup.
That is a pretty toy. If he can manage to get this Ensnaring Bridge down, he might have to wait a turn. He does know about the Stubborn Denial in Brandon's hand.
He can play this. Well, no, he can't.
He can. He has Inspire of Industry. He had three lands. He just couldn't play it through Stubborn Denial. So he probably will wait for next turn and then hopefully sneak this through the Stubborn Denial. Little does he know, Brandon is sitting pretty with a Thoughtseize to more likely than not snag the Ensnaring Bridge.
Taking that Ensnaring Bridge.
I don't imagine there's any other target you want to be hitting in this deck. If he can follow this up with like crack the fetch land, get another black source, play a Death Shadow, he's actually in really good shape. Doesn't look like that's the plan, though.
But don't forget that Maelstrom Pulse that is sitting in Benjamin's hand.
Well, we also know Brandon has at least one Stubborn Denial.
That is true.
So if he can manage to get a Tarmogoyf or a Death Shadow down before Ensnaring Bridge shows up, this could be pretty good for him, even with the multiple lock pieces and Welding Jar. Benjamin's just not drawing anything. Well.
I'm surprised that he is getting rid of the Stubborn Denial, but he does need to find a threat. It looks like he brought in a Pithing Needle there as he was looking through his deck.
Pithing Needle here, if he manages to draw it, probably names Welding Jar. I would imagine. And then if he happens to draw it, he can.
Well,
Ooh,
is that a?
that is a Traverse the Ulvenwald, I believe.
That can go find you Death Shadows. Does he have Delirium? I believe he does not actually have Delirium.
Yeah, he does not currently. He does have that basic island though, which is a very interesting very interesting land for him to have. He told me in between the rounds that one of the shops that he plays at has a lot of pesky Blood Moon players and just Blood Moon and Taxes players is what he's worried about. So playing the unusual island.
There's a Pixis Pandemonium right there.
That Pixis could be the final piece of the puzzle for Benjamin.
I guess we'll find out.
I still think he's probably hard on looking for that Ensnaring Bridge.
Well, there is a Mishra's Bauble. That could potentially go get... I'm not sure what he's doing here.
He's showing the cards that Benjamin already knows.
Okay.
So, I believe Benjamin was asking about cards that he should know already, and Brandon is being a good sport and showing him, these are the cards I have that you have already seen.
Now, does putting Mishra's Bauble in the graveyard give him Delirium?
I believe it does.
It has a sorcery, land...
Instant, and that is an artifact.
What instant does he have in the graveyard?
Oh, he doesn't have an instant. He just has 2 lands and 3 sorceries. So he probably just flashes back Lingering Souls and just goes to town. I think the Lingering Souls tokens, they're not going to do the job quickly, but they will. They do present a clock. 4 of them especially.
True.
They do present a solid clock. And him having that Pixis doesn't really matter as much right now. The fact of the matter is he already has... Ooh, we forgot about that Maelstrom Pulse.
The Lingering Souls.
Now,
that seems like a pretty good play in this position.
And he has the mana to pay for the Stubborn Denial. So playing the Stubborn Denial doesn't matter.
I'm surprised that he even tried casting the Stubborn Denial in this situation.
That seems like... Oh, the only thing with casting the Stubborn Denial is that gives him Delirium.
It does, and he has another... Stubborn Denial on top, but
that Stubborn Denial will not see the light of day.
No, it will not.
If he casts that Traverse the Ulvenwald, I will be surprised if Benjamin does not snap off a Pixis activation. I imagine he does not want Brandon even possibly getting a Stubborn Denial.
Okay.
Ooh, does not care about the Stubborn Denial. That seems aggressive. I imagine Tarmogoyf is the play. Get that Goyfa going, and we'll see.
Benjamin needs to find a Whirl of Invention or a Ensnaring Bridge,
and he needs it now.
Yes,
this is getting very risky for him. That Tarmogoyf is
a 4/5,
as at least a 4/5, and any creature or planeswalker that hits that graveyard is just going to make that clock that much faster.
Now there is a...
I'm interested that he activated the Pixis there. I know he probably didn't want to draw a land of his own.
There's a Codex Shredder.
Ooh. Inquisition, tagging another Inquisition, and revealing a Street Wraith.
Having that Street Wraith in your hand is actually very interesting because it allows him to... If he sees something on the top of his library that he wants that... is going to get eaten by a Pixis or a Shredder.
Yeah, he has to time it very carefully, though. He actually now has 2 Street Wraiths, so this is interesting. It almost begs the question of, does Benjamin even want to activate this Pixis at this point?
Probably not.
Don't you just want Brandon to keep drawing lands at this juncture? Drawing, why? And then
did he just cycle that Street Wraith?
He just cycled a Street Wraith. Why would he pick up another land?
Well, it's going to get pretty good for Benjamin here, having 3 Codex Shredders here shortly.
Yeah, if he can manage to be patient and not activate the Pixis and just rely on this Codex Shredder for a turn, being able to have double Codex Shredder with the Pixis and the Lantern, that is a pretty good lock setup. I believe the life total is 8-8. So we'll see. Well, there's another land for Brandon. As unfortunate as it has been for Benjamin, the top of Brandon's library is being very cooperative with him, and it seems the top of Benjamin's library is
I'm
not.
surprised that Benjamin's not hitting himself to try and find an ensnaring bridge or something like that with Codex Shredder.
I imagine that will be the play this turn.
Oh, he's getting back. I'm not sure what he's going to get back Maelstrom Pulse here. Or no,
Oh,
Ensnaring
he got
Bridge.
back the Ensnaring Bridge. So he gets to untap, play the Ensnaring Bridge
Ooh, this
with
is gonna
double Welding Jar. This
and
is
there's a Whirl of
going.
Invention.
This is going to be a game of cat and mouse right here, because if he plays the Ensnaring Bridge, there's incentive for
Now, what Brandon needs to do here is cycle that Street Wraith.
if he
to
does that, all he's going to draw is a
right.
Pixis activation in response. Ugh. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it seems like Benjamin is in a good spot.
It is true. Ooh, he lets him draw that Stubborn now.
I don't think the Stubborn Denial matters at this
Eh.
point. You already have Ensnaring
That's
Bridge
true.
plus double Welding Jar. I think the only things that Benjamin cares about right now is if Brandon has like a Fracturing Gust effect, or if he manages to pull, for instance, Pithing Needle. Because Pithing Needle is about the only thing right now that he can reasonably draw that can actually get him out of this. Pithing Needle on the Welding Jar plus any piece of artifact removal just catapults him to a victory. But I don't think he's ever going to get the chance. I think the lock is on, and I think this game is going to be a slow, painful grind.
This is why I don't like Lantern Control.
I'm always interested by these decks that can claw victory from the most dire of positions.
There's
and
a
that's
surgical
and that's
distraction.
really what he's doing right now. He has just absolutely clawed his way to a position of strength here. He went from being dead to rights. Just completely dead in the water. All of a sudden, Codex Shredder's back, an Ensnaring Bridge. It was actually really clever of him to not cast the second Codex Shredder, because it left him just enough mana to Codex Shredder the Ensnaring Bridge back, and then on top of that, it also elicited the Inquisition of Kozilek out of Brandon. So it got him to Inquisition something that ultimately didn't matter.
I'm going to let you take over for a little bit. I need to go take care of the drafters downstairs.
Okay. So now the real question is, can Brandon manage to get to artifact removal and Pithing Needle? That's going to be the real question. Can he manage to pull 2 cards? Because he no longer is 1 card to win the game. He needs at least 2 cards. Street Wraith from Brandon on the Traverse is actually super interesting. As we noted earlier, it gives him the ability to kind of fight with the Lantern player over lock pieces, because he can cycle Street Wraiths in response to basically anything that Benjamin tries to do. I also find it interesting that he just snapped that surgical extraction off in the face of the Stubborn Denial. I imagine there's probably not a whole lot that Benjamin's going to get that are better targets at this point. because second ensnaring bridge doesn't really matter much. Additional, like another lantern, doesn't really matter much. It really just... Ooh, and there is Ancient Grudge. That is a good card here. That is, with double Street Wraith, he can hold up multiple ways to pull this Ancient Grudge off the top of his library. And getting able to, if he manages to cast both halves, he's actually in a pretty good position. At the very least, that clears both of the Welding Jars out of the way. Puts him in a position where one card allows him to clear out the... Is Benjamin going to allow this to happen? Is that what I'm seeing? Is he... Okay, so Benjamin values the lantern on the board more than he does the letting Brandon have the Ancient Grudge, which is interesting. I would have imagined that I probably would have used the lantern to shuffle there, because a shuffle out of the lantern there, prevent that Ancient Grudge from coming around. He didn't have a third draw effect, so he had no way to force that through the extra piece. But it is... This is interesting. It's also interesting that Brandon didn't... Oh, he doesn't have a red source, does he? He's not running many red sources. I believe a single Blood Crypt. So if he doesn't have a red source, and now that he's down to 3, he has to fetch, bring it in tapped, which is what we are seeing now. Down to 2. There's the Blood Crypt. Has to come in tapped. There it is.
And I am back.
You missed. Brandon managed to get an Ancient Grudge.
Ooh. Well, at this point, I don't think it really matters because those Welding Jars just...
The big thing is...
and he
nope,
just scoops it up.
He's done. He's done. That is the... I think my goose is cooked. So we will get on to game 3. I imagine sideboarding for this will be a little bit quicker. But we'll see if Brandon can manage to get one of the aggressive draws again. Because that aggressive draw from game 1 is really what he was trying to do, and he almost got there game 2. It was so close, just on the razor's edge. And he's actually going into sideboarding.
Well, I feel like he might want to take out some of those.
I think the Lingering Souls did not look good there.
No.
Out
Usually
of
getting hit by that Maelstrom Pulse.
Yeah, with Benjamin having access to some number of Maelstrom Pulse, I imagine that the Lingering Souls is just too slow and grindy for the kind of games that you want to have here. I think we've seen Gorkland Rampager out of his deck. I think that's fine. The ability for you to swing a smaller Death Shadow through Ensnaring Bridge, like if you have a 2/2 Death Shadow, you can swing that through an Ensnaring Bridge potentially, and then being able to just pump it with Gorkland Rampager, that's probably pretty good. And I imagine if he has any number of Temur Battle Rage, those are probably pretty good here. But I really think he just wants to be on aggro out a Death Shadow as large as he can make it, and just try to go to town before Benjamin gets lock set up. That said, that game... Ooh, and there's a Pithing Needle. That's
that
pretty
should be
good.
a pretty good one. Oh, and he's... Oh, okay.
I see double Codex Shredder from Benjamin, and I believe I saw a Welding Jar. And a Mox Opal. That's a pretty good start.
It's a pretty good start right there.
I believe that is a probably going to be a land Codex Shredder, Mox Opal, Welding Jar. Use the Mox Opal to tap for mana for second Codex Shredder. And then we're playing Affinity, just with artifacts that don't attack. Pretty good start.
I guess this is a keep.
Brandon going to 6, probably 1 land hand.
Must have been.
I don't imagine you mulligan a hand that has your Pithing Needle otherwise. Because Pithing Needle...
Oh, that's an Ensnaring Bridge.
Based on last game, Pithing Needle seemed like the nuts.
Yes, it did.
Now, let's see, does he power out all the things? Powering out all of the things. Does he play the second Codex Shredder here? I think you play the second Codex Shredder.
You probably do.
Ooh. Stubborn Annihilating
able to now.
Yeah, that was actually a timely Stubborn Annihil. That's a clever piece of work by Brandon, turning off that Mox Opal, as well as just preventing that first lock piece from coming down. It's pretty smart play out of him. It'll be interesting to see if he has another Stubborn Annihil, because if he has another one, I imagine the second one is pretty good.
Here's a Tarmogoyf.
Yeah. Getting the beat started is also good.
If he has a 0-mana artifact here, he will be able to... Okay. Never.
No 0-mana artifact. Though, also no second land. Second land would have been great there.
Well, I'm sure he'll find a land here, getting this Botanical Sanctum right here.
Yeah. If he had had the second land before playing the Codex Shredder, that would have been great for him. Because being able to power out a turn 2 Ensnaring Bridge while having Welding Jar already up, that would have been a fantastic way to start the game, even if his hand wasn't quite as empty as he would have liked.
Right.
Ooh, and second Ancient Stirrings finds a third land.
Surgical Extracting that Stubborn Denial.
I imagine, yeah, Stubborn Denial would have to be the target. There's really nothing else that he's going to hit. Because he's not going to Surgical Extraction his own Ancient Stirrings.
No. He could hit Bloodstained Mire if he wanted to, but I would assume that,
like we said in the earlier games, though it did become relevant in Game 1 for a hot minute, it's generally not a good idea to target specific fetch lands in these Death Shadow decks, especially the 5-color ones.
Right.
They just run so many different ones, because you have to be able to hit all 5 colors at any given time. That said, hitting these Stubborn Denials is really good for Benjamin. It means the chance of him getting to play his Ensnaring Bridge just absolutely skyrocketed. With Brandon only being able to swing for 4 this turn, this is beginning to look like it might be an actual Lantern control game where we actually see lock pieces do something before the player gets down to, single-digit life.
Oh, that's a Pithing Needle right there. That is a good pickup for Brandon.
I assume you put Pithing Needle on Welding Jar?
I would assume that you'd... I will go...
Pithing Needle on Welding Jar seems like the smartest decision.
No, it's on...
He named it on
be
Codex Shredder. That is also fine. Being able to turn off...
Now, okay. He named it... Okay, hold on. I got it.
Okay, yeah, no, once... You don't actually get to name anything on Pithing Needle till after it resolves. So, he can't Codex Shredder in response. So we're going to get them to correct this. That Thoughtseize should not actually be in the graveyard. It should be what Brandon draws for the turn. we'll get this corrected real quick, make sure that everyone understands how the cards work and the intention behind the plays. It's kind of a weird interaction. There are a few cards like that they enter proper, and then, if it resolves, you pick something. So you can't actually respond to the picking of something. You have to respond to it entering.
So what happened was Brandon got a little hasty and was naming something while Pithing Needle was still on the stack. So Benjamin was trying to stop him and activate his Codex Shredder before the Pithing Needle resolved.
Now, interesting question would be, does Brandon have any tutor targets that blow up artifacts?
I believe he does not. I believe he's relying pretty much on Ancient Grudge. But Ancient Grudge is not a bad one because it gives you
2 for the price of 1.
Right. And that's all he needs right now. Is just to get rid of this ensnaring bridge that's on the battlefield.
Yeah, if he can manage to clear the ensnaring bridge out of the way, he's actually in really good shape.
Abrupt Decay would also work here if he has it, because Abrupt Decay's it says it can't be countered. Never mind.
Yeah, Abrupt Decay cannot be countered, but you can regenerate the target.
Right. Oh, I forgot. Was it interesting?
Little bit of cheeky fun out of
it.
them.
Looks like he did keep the Lingering Souls in, which is actually relevant because it looks like Benjamin still has some cards in hand.
Specifically, 1 card in hand,
mm-hmm.
which that makes the Lingering Souls super relevant. Though, the interesting thing about the mana in this deck, he is fetching off of a Bloodstained Mire, and I imagine he needs to get the one of Godless Shrine so that he can cast the Lingering Souls. But this leaves him unable to cast any Ancient Grudges he pulls, because he no longer has a way to get a red source.
That is true.
And until he turns on Delirium, which I believe he is short of, because I only see land, creature, sorcery in his graveyard, he will not be able to traverse for a red source. So he's currently dead in the water. Basically, he is on Abrupt Decay or bust, or he needs to hit Ancient Grudge plus a land, which is an interesting place to be. And he needs to do this before Benjamin manages to find a Lantern of Insight, because at this point, if he finds a Lantern of Insight, he's got double Codex Shredder, and then this is where the Lantern deck wants to be. Oh, that is true, because of the Pithing Needle. I forget.
Yeah, this looks like a Whirl of Invention.
Wonder what the Whir goes to get. Imagine
looks
a lantern.
Like
it's for a lantern. It's for a lantern. That makes sense. You want to know what you're up against. That said, at this point, Pithing Needle on Codex Shredder, there's not a whole lot Brandon's going to do about this.
Ben still has 1 card in hand.
Can't even get down to empty-handed. Oh, or is this another Whir of Invention?
It looks like another Whir of Invention.
I imagine this one probably goes to get a Pyxis of Pandemonium.
It does. It does indeed.
Have to get that lock on somehow. Now, I also imagine you don't let him have this Street Wraith here. After all of the hijinks that Street Wraith caused in the last game, basically prolonging the actual lock, I don't think you let him have Street Wraith. If you let him have Street Wraith, you give him the option to fight over any card that's on top of his library. And he lets him have it.
Okay. That Inquisition is no good. No good.
That is a non-play here. The one thing really going for Brandon here is that Benjamin's not really, like, he's still fairly dead to an Ancient Grudge or an Abrupt Decay. Like, Ancient Grudge especially, he still doesn't have a red source, but
looks like he's flashing back those Lingering Souls here.
And
it looks like the Inquisition is still on the top of his deck.
Well, unfortunately, we can't blame that one on a Moto
No,
bug.
I cannot. Wait, this isn't Moto?
I know, it's surprising. I
Weird.
am as surprised as you are. I'm confused as to why Benjamin made Brandon tap a third land. Oh, because he traversed for the basic swamp.
I
Never
see.
mind. We are good. We have solved the mystery. Whew. Basic land for Brandon. That is not very good. They are just, if they just keep drawing lands back and forth, this is not going to go anywhere.
That is an
very
abrupt
quickly.
decay right there, which is scary for Brandon.
Abrupt decay on
That pithing needle.
Pithing Needle probably locks this game away for Benjamin. That is all he needs. Second welding jar, that is
Yep.
just the icing on the cake.
Yep,
This
it looks
is-
like Brandon might be dead here.
This is where the game gets slow and painful, and Brandon no longer gets to play Magic.
Yep.
There's one Codex Shred.
Now I'm surprised he used the Codex Shredder there.
There's a Pixis. I'm not sure I agree with using the Pixis there. I think I would have stuck with double Codex Shredder. I think you want the second welding jar there,
Mhm.
because in theory, especially since you just let him have a fetch land, in theory, Ancient Grudge is still good enough. It's kind of a weird place to be, but Ancient Grudge, if he plays that Verdant Catacombs, which he just did, Ancient Grudge is still good enough. Which is surprising to think. But now we get to do the ever so fun Milieu for one, Milieu for one, Milieu for one. Looks like Brandon's being a good sport about it. I'm fairly certain everyone involved knows that they're dead, but since this is the final game of the final round for the night, they're just allowing it to happen, so we can see the joys of milling someone a single card at a time.
Yay.
This deck actually does some pretty impressive things. I know it can be kind of obnoxious, and it's especially obnoxious to play against, but it really is kind of impressive how the collection of 1-mana artifacts that on their own do kind of a whole lot of nothing.
It's amazing how much there's a bunch of nothing in Brandon's deck once you get to the late game as well, with all these Inquisitions and Thoughtseizes.
Yeah, he has reached a point where the only cards that he is going to be allowed to draw are discard cards that do nothing and lands that do equally nothing. So I imagine Cycled Street Wraith there is interesting. I'm not sure I would necessarily use the Street Wraith at that juncture. I think it's probably better to...
And he's going to go search for an artifact. Probably...
Does he grab another Codex Shredder, maybe? Yes, that is exactly what he's doing. Third Codex Shredder.
Yeah.
That puts the hard lock down. I don't think Brandon gets to play another Magic card this game.
He definitely does not. And a Whirl of Invention. This game is over.
And this is where the Lantern player goes.
And another Whirl of Invention.
All the whir. Have you heard about the whir? I said a whir. Where's the word?
Now, what does he get here?
I imagine you just get another lock piece. Either, extra Pixis. I imagine
He's already dead.
extra Pixis, fourth Codex Shredder, second Ensnaring Bridge. Well, he didn't have enough for second Ensnaring Bridge, but second Welding Jar. All those are great here. having
Brandon.
having 5 lock pieces just means that
Man.
this game is absolutely incredibly over. And now it's just a matter of time
Come on, buddy.
until Benjamin mills him out one at a time, slowly, painfully.
Buddy.
It's the
I'm
last
surprised
game.
that he kept the pushes in.
You should let them know that it's time. Because this game might actually go to a draw.
That is a good point.
This could get interesting if Benjamin does not have enough lock pieces to actually mill Brandon out. This could potentially go to a draw, and that is something that is a legitimate concern in this matchup, and in any matchup that Lantern's involved in. You have to be able to combo in a timely manner. It's just a matter of fact. You gotta get him dead at some point. So Brandon can still struggle through this for a 1-1-1 draw, which I imagine he's going to fight the good fight. I think the game is probably well enough over. I'm not sure how many cards he has left in his library, but it can't be many. Looks to be somewhere between 10 and 15. Ooh, there is an Ancient Grudge. That could make things interesting. There's a Mishra's Bauble. How hard are we going to fight over getting this Ancient Grudge? Not even at all. Search for Azcanta is an interesting card for the Lantern deck. Also, Dismember is an interesting card for Brandon to still have in his deck. I imagine the only thing that it hits is Padim. Looks like Benjamin has... If this is truly turn 3, turn 4 for Brandon, Benjamin might have just enough to actually win the game and thus the match. Does he have enough? Is he going to do it? I don't see any... There's nothing cheeky like a Noxious Revival in Brandon's deck. So he can't just randomly throw a card on top of his library. And I believe he is deterministically dead. Being able for Benjamin to Pixis the Ancient Grudge and not give Brandon a chance to actually even sniff at getting it for himself is enough to just lock the game out. The question is there a way that Benjamin can actually force him to draw? And this is the final turn. Unfortunately, he doesn't actually win the game from Pixis or Codex Shredder activation. And if he passes the turn to Brandon, the game is just over, and it is a draw. So the question is, does Brandon give the win to Benjamin off of being deterministically dead, or do they take the draw? That is a real question. See if we can get Ethan to give us some clarity here. This is an interesting place to be. It is most certainly an interesting place to be. Does Benjamin have some way to force Brandon to draw? I don't think he can do it. I think the game is going to end in a draw unless Brandon decides to be a good sport about it, because Benjamin actually has no way to legitimately win. Okay, well, I am going to get down there and see if we can get an actual final result real quick. Because I'm not sure if that is if that was Brandon conceding, or if that is them agreeing that it is a draw. So I'm not entirely sure. Sounds like Ethan is coming up, so we can see.
Draw.
It is a draw. So they did.
Wasn't able to.
They did go to a draw.
They wasn't able to.
There's no way for him to force Brandon to actually draw a card, which means that it is a draw, and that is the end. That is a draw. They are both 2-1 and 1 to end the day, and then that will be the end of our time here. That is actually the end of round 4. That is our final round for the day. So there will be, unfortunately, no more Magic. I was hoping we might be able to sneak a 5th round in there, but just short on players for a 5th round. So this has been the Four Horsemen Comics and Gaming Friday Night Magic stream. Hope you guys have had a wonderful time watching and enjoying some good quality Modern play with us. Got to see some spicy stuff today, so it was a lot of fun for us. Hope it was a lot of fun for you guys too, and we will see you guys next time.